Next, Keiser's coming on to talk about the world's economy, Bitcoin, and more. Stefan Molyneux, the anarchic capitalist, is going to be popping in to give his take on the battle between collectivists and individuals and where he thinks it's all going. And we'll also cover some of the big world events with him. We're going to have open phones as well, interspersed with both guests today here on this live, original 13th day of December 2013. And obviously, I'm your host, Alex Jones. Wow, where to start? I mean, it's just every day I get frustrated because there's so much news I want to cover. We're going to attempt to get to all of it. Guess who earned PolitiFact's top lie of 2013? And I agree this is probably the biggest lie of 2013. No, not the lie of saying you can keep your health care plan and your prices won't go up, but then saying he never said it. And then saying, no, I meant if you don't want to keep your doctor, or if you do want to keep your doctor, or you're, after the bill goes into place and is law, then you'll lose your doctor, is what I meant. But until then, you won't lose your doctor. I mean, he said so many different things, and they basically over at PolitiFact say that it is one of the biggest lies they've ever seen, calling it pants on fire level. So there you go. And Oprah Winfrey says, because I don't like being lied to, that I am a racist. That's why people don't like Obama, is because they are racist, period. I think Hitler or Stalin or Mao should have tried that, but I guess they weren't as politically correct, even in those authoritarian countries as we are. It just makes being under oppression so fashionable, so cool when Obama bombs a country, so cool when he has the NSA spying on his political enemies or persecuting the press. And again, Obama himself is just a globalist manufactured frontman, but still, under Obama, they've gotten away with more than any other American president we've ever seen. And I can think of a few cases in history where the out-of-control behavior has gotten this bizarro. So that's just some of what's coming up today. The big news is obviously Chinese naval vessel tries to force U.S. warship to stop in international waters. That story's up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. It's red-linked on the right-hand side of DrudgeReport.com. There's another report out. The bogus Mandela singer faced a murder rap in 2003 and has other reported crimes and attempted crimes and charges in his background. I could take one look at that guy in the television interviews that they've been airing, and he's obviously completely out of his mind. And the bigger question is then how did he get up there on the stage? And I know that's a distractionary story. It's not even that important, but it's still just the marvel of how the government can't even get itself together. But they have this projection with the jet airplanes and the red carpets and the Marines snapping to attention and the clicking, flashing cameras that they are just invincible, above the law, godlike creatures, and all of us are simply mere mortals, while the rich and powerful live up in their ivory towers, more and more extracting wealth through government combines, not via the free market. Spain's public debt hits a record 93.4% of GDP, just like ours is going in that direction. That's mission complete for the New World Order. UN confirms chemical arms were used repeatedly in Syria. And the way this was phrased on the news last night in talk radio and TV was it proved Assad did it. But they go on to admit that they don't know who did it. Well, actually, we do know who did it, and we're going to break that down. And Cy Hirsch knows who did it as well. And it was the al-Qaeda forces who've been given part of Western Iraq by our loving occupied government, the criminals that run our government. It's all coming up on the other side of this quick break. Stay with us. I'm Alex Jones. Follow us on Twitter, Real Alex Jones. It's got mainline economists saying that they've now entered a false reality. Every market valuation has lost every anchor to the real world. That's Reagan advisor Keiser's going to be joining us coming up in the second hour. Stefan Molyneux, third hour. And I'm going to take calls for each half hour with them for your questions and comments. I really love the questions and comments that folks bring up. So we'll be opening the phones up when they're on with us. Where to start? Here's some of the headlines up on Infowars.com. Democrat debt victory and the decline of the Tea Party Republicans. You know, I don't know if I agree with Nemo on that, but it's certainly up for debate. You can go in there and comment and give us your take. That just went up seconds ago. 0 comments on that top story there. But it's definitely the decline of the rhino fake Tea Party Democrats run by people like Karl Rove. If you actually look at it through Campaign for Liberty and Ron Paul and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, their popularity is more than ever. And people are running at city, state, county, federal races and winning, and actually shooting down the Syria expansion of the war. Shooting down so many of the initiatives, gun control, restricting our Second Amendment. I mean, from that perspective, I see what Kurt's saying. But, again, I don't agree completely with all my writers. We have some diversity of freedom-based thought. But I do see his point that it's the decline of mainline fake Tea Party people. But it is pretty disgusting. Paul Ryan promenades with Democrats as debt heads to the stratosphere. And look at what's happening. Now they have this House budget deal for cuts that both parties dislike. Yeah, but they already increased spending 60-something billion, and then they cut that. So it's like they increase it, and then they cut it. Like if I, caught one of my kids in the Fig Newtons or something, and they said, and I caught them eating like 10 Fig Newtons before dinner, and they had 10 of them in their hands, and I said, you can't have any of those Fig Newtons till after dinner, and then they go, only 5. That's exactly the type of stuff that we're dealing with here, and here's a headline out of Breitbart. Spain's public debt hits record at 93.4% of GDP, and that's current obligations, not counting all the future obligations. It's more like 200+% of their GDP. That's not sustainable in any universe, and that's where we're being maneuvered by these big offshore mega banks that run the New World Order. They want us bankrupted. That's their plan. So we're going to be breaking that down. Budget passed by House eases cuts both parties dislike. And that is a accurate headline from Drudge. And that's a Bloomberg story. Because the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, they're not even talking about the QE unlimited by the Federal Reserve that's devaluing all of our dollars. That's why the stock market's so high, even though it's been down this week a little bit, is because they're chasing the stocks with devalued dollars, and there's nowhere else to invest because you don't even get interest now at the bank on average. In fact, banks are talking about, we've already done this in areas of Europe, making you pay to have money in there. That's called Weimar Republic type indicators. Oh, but a congresswoman is complaining, saying it's harder to recruit federal workers if they don't keep increasing their pay and if they don't keep expanding basically the federal budget. And then when they wreck the society, their answer will be even more collectivism, more taxes, more control over the middle class. And by the way, Rahm Emanuel's brother, the doctor, Ezekiel Emanuel, who helped write the Obamacare monstrosity, admits on Fox Sunday, months ago, that the plans to get rid of the market where you can go out and get your own insurance and basically bring it into a socialist model with the big insurance companies on top getting the profits. So they socialize all of our lives and socialize the debt, so we all have to pay it, but then privatize the profits offshore. And so we knew they were bringing in death panels, and now they admit it. We knew they were planning to bankrupt the healthcare system. Further, that's a classic socialist communist tactic. And I want to explain something here. We've got the LA Times here doing a profile. For new listeners, we're not saying this is a communist conspiracy we face or a socialist conspiracy. It is a collectivist, anti-liberty system for the general public with a tiny technocratic elite, less than 0.1%, less than 6,000 top globalists in the superclass that the head of the Kissinger group, Rothkopf, talks about, and I agree with his analysis. He's pushing it as a good thing. These people are largely exempt, just like Congress is, just like the EU bureaucrats are, just like the French government are, from the high taxes. The 100% taxes on the middle class and the nouveau riche, new wealthy in France is designed to destroy them as a class while transferring their wealth to the people that call themselves socialists, who are really a bunch of knuckle-dragging, bank-robbing thugs who all have Swiss bank accounts on record for 1 year not paying the taxes, and the head of the IMF is exempt from the EU-wide taxes that she wants to be raised. These are parasite criminals, period. They are our enemies, and they're never going to stop. And they're going to use the deindustrialization and the so-called service economy they're now shutting down. Oh, first it's going to be a service economy. Told you they were going to get rid of that. They've done this in other countries to have you under full control. So they dominate the future. So they control the future. So they run our lives. They are eugenicist, transhumanist, delusional, power-tripping criminals who take our money and energy and ideas and get to play God, and their reign of control freak garbage needs to come to an end now. They are not going to give us quarter. They are not going to back off. They're not going to stop. They are mentally ill, psychopathic control freaks. Let me just do this. I kind of went off onto a rampage about that. I mean, I use this example. I'll use it again. Warren Buffett's the biggest recipient of the first round of banker bailout. 40-something billion for Berkshire Hathaway in the first year of it. Of course, he's lobbying to raise taxes, ladies and gentlemen, because he basically has had the laws written where his offshore subsidiaries are tax exempt. Now, if you can't figure that out, he's always on TV eating an ice cream cone. Always eating an ice cream cone because it's a non-threatening thing. Just like somebody pulls up to kidnap your kids out of the backyard, they go, I got an ice cream cone, I got a puppy. Evil doesn't come dressed like Adolf Hitler very often, folks, in a military uniform, screaming and yelling. Evil comes all simpering and, oh, we're here to help you. Do what we say or Oprah Winfrey will call you a racist. Now is the time to face the reality. We have been boarded by pirates using high-tech PR systems, and they're backed up by a paramilitary takeover system if we try to get out of line. Well, the answer is to have a full break with them and a full wake-up to them. And then there's nothing they can do to stop us if we start withdrawing from their system, only voting with our dollars with people and groups that promote liberty, and literally focusing on them as the enemy and as the problem with absolute total hatred. Because they hate us, folks. Now, again, we fight them because we love our family. But when we see them, there needs to be revulsion. There needs to be an absolute, there's Jeffrey Dahmer. There's Hitler, there's Stalin, there's Mao. These people are our enemies, our declared enemies. They are robbing us and destroying our republic. And the only thing that's going to beat them is absolute revulsion and shunning, as they deploy armored vehicles and drones against us and criminally spy on us and hire huge armies of control freak miscreants, psychologically tested, showing that they're cowards and want to dominate others. They are building an army worthy of Mordor against us, and we must rally against them. I mean, that's why I get so excited, folks, because I look at this stuff every day, at night, in the morning, in the afternoon. I'm living this stuff 16, 17, 18 hours a day. I know how real it is. All right, let me just give you some of the headlines because I keep saying I'm going to get to that. Guess who earned PolitiFact's top lie 2013? Obama. We're going to tell you about that. Chinese naval vessels try to force U.S. warships to stop international waters, trying to ram the ship. Folks, this is real, what's happening in China. And all our insiders have told you for years, watch China, it's the big one. Unbelievable. Belgium Senate approves measure allowing doctors to euthanize children. Isn't that just precious? They decide when to terminate them. It's socialist. That's how you save money. You can pay the government pensions if you kill some kids. Remember Bill Gates said, we don't give grandma care. We hire 10 teachers, and the teachers got real excited. Hey, teachers, you really think somebody like that's going to give you a bigger pension? They've already domesticated us. They're going to be taking the pensions now, Cupcake. Just get ready. Let's go to the next one. NSA leaders split on giving amnesty to Snowden. Folks, unless Snowden's a double agent, he can never come back, okay? Let's just get that straight. Also, sky's the limit. New towers for the rich soar in New York And if you look at these groups as a group, they're people with government contracts or insiders in the stock market and the rigged system, who, by the way, are lobbying for higher taxes and gun control, but then they own guns themselves, like the head of the White House run Media Matters. But just like Dianne Feinstein. They have guns and bodyguards because they know what they've done. You don't. You don't. They're going to get your guns. Of course they want your guns. Look at Goldman Sachs with all their armed guards in New York. They're going to have guns while they reach into your back pocket. Hands up. They got the guns. They're going to get yours. They're going to take that Bible away from you, too, you bitter clingers. All over the country, they're pulling down crosses. They're even pulling them off private property, saying people are offended. Pulling them out of the... But you know what? We're going to teach your 5-year-old how to have anal sex. And if you don't like it, you're a terrorist. By the way, is that a brown bag you got at work? That's racist. You're fired. But if you want to call for sterilization of black people in Africa, that's okay. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. So I mentioned this. Let me give you the facts now. Guess who earned PolitiFact's top lie of 2013? PolitiFact's being racist, Oprah said. Each year, PolitiFact chooses the most egregious and misleading lie made by a U.S. political figure, with the top 4 all involving Obamacare. It may surprise you who won the top spot. Oh, no, I'm not surprised at all. If you like your health care, you can keep your health care. Remember that quote President Obama repeated numerous times? Yeah, in the State of the Union as well. While that was bad enough, it was far worse when he modified the lie, inserting a disclaimer, according to CNN. First, he said he'd never said it. Then they played it. Then he said, well, what I meant was, well, he said was you could keep it if it hasn't changed since the law passed. Said Obama. And PolitiFact gave that the pants on fire. And we played this already a bunch. We're not going to play it again. Oprah told the BBC about 3 weeks ago that people are criticizing the Lord, the dear leader, Adolf Hitler, I mean, Barack Obama, Kim Jong-un, himself, the dear leader, the one who makes the birds tweet, the one that makes the businesses run. If you have a business, you didn't build it. The dear leader that doubled and tripled your premiums and kicked you off your doctor plan and built the giant system so it would be a fraud and wouldn't work, so they could claim it was a screw job because it didn't work, not because they screwed you. See, oh, it's an accident. I told you that was coming. I know how these criminals operate. Well, now they admit it. They go, it's good it doesn't work. We're going to ruin the whole system and go to pure commie care. See, they even admit it because they're criminals and they love to rub your nose in it. And they're going to keep doing it because they know you love it. So again, Obama is a victim of racism, she said, and they just have to die. Remember that video? They just have to die. In fact, I'm going to apologize in a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to Oprah. I'm not mad at Obama because he wants to take my guns or because he's offshoring our jobs or because he's totally selling us out with the Republican leadership and deindustrializing the nation. I'm not mad at him that he wants to federalize all the schools and has MSNBC openly say that my children belong to the state. I'm not mad that it's ripping people off and shutting down the economy and wrecking healthcare in this country, even worse with Obamacare by design. I'm not mad at all that. I'm mad because, folks, it is because he has light brown skin. It very upsets me. And it's deep racism, and I need to be killed. I want to invite Oprah Winfrey to come to Austin, Texas, and we'll build a guillotine for her, and she can pull the lever and chop my head off. Because I disagree with him, and I think I don't like him. And she is a goddess, and when she speaks as a fountain of wisdom, it's true. And so she spoke ex cathedra from her throne, and so that means it is written, it is done. And so all of us who don't like anything Obama does need to die. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, Oprah, but... I actually don't want to die. I actually want your horrible political ideas to die. Because we know, Oprah, it's been leaked in the London Guardian and the Sunday Times of London and the ABC News wrote a whitewash on it, that you meet at the secret eugenics meetings to push a alternate world government plan to forcibly reduce world population. And we know what you push on depopulation in Africa. And so that's why you call everyone a racist all day. The truth is you as a multi-billionaire are led into the elite halls at elite meetings with 10 or 12 people at them, way above Bilderberg, because you are such a traitor to humanity and such a traitor to black people. And you are a pig. and a disgusting, fat, demonic worm. And I don't mean that because sometimes you balloon up and balloon down like a self-propelled stomach. All of us have weight problems, at least sometimes. Most of us do. I mean, you're spiritually an obese demon. I mean, your sins are bloated and oozing with the crimes you've committed and against humanity and the division you've showed and the con games, giving women free cars, knowing it'll make all the other welfare-type folks and lottery ticket-type people tune in, believing they're going to get some type of free deal, manipulating your audience in a cold-blooded, calculated, anti-human, collectivist way. Not in this life or the next. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back live. I'm going to race through some more of the headlines here and drill into a few of the other really important stories a little bit more, and then go to your phone calls for folks that are patiently holding. Briefly, Christmas is here. I know I just committed a politically incorrect thought crime, but Christmas is here. And even if you're not a Christian or don't like our Lord and Savior Santa Claus, I'm being sarcastic, that's what the media's turned it into, you can certainly enjoy time off and spending time with your families. And we have a lot of different specials running right now. 10% off the great stainless steel gravity-fed filters, what I use for my family. Promo code WATER to get 10% off the already lowest prices out there on the best gravity-fed filters. You can take them on the road. They've got the Nomad and Traveler types. They've got the Big King type systems that can even be used at your restaurant or office. And they've got the Pro Pure Pro 1 systems that cut out the fluoride, the glyphosates. The leading competition doesn't do this, or I'd be selling it. I did sell the competition before. When better stuff came out, I went to this. And then why even sell the other stuff if it's not as good? It's just kind of a no-brainer. I'd make more money selling everything, but I'm just not going to do it. This is the best system for a gravity-fed system, and it's available at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139. And we are busy like an anthill here, getting ready to finish up the new studio, some of the new films, all the work we're doing, reaching well over 15 million people a week one way or another on all the different platforms. And I want to boost that to 30 million, 40 million, 50 million a week. And we've got plans to do it. It's hard to get to that next level, so busy with all the stuff we're currently doing. But we're getting the folks in, getting them trained, moving forward. We're getting very, very close, thanks to all your help out there. We're giving our maximum effort against the New World Order. And when you purchase the books, the videos, the T-shirts, all the great things that are at InfoWarsStore.com, it makes the transmission possible. And finally, there's InfoWarsLife.com, where we have the proprietary nascent iodine. In fact, I keep forgetting since we moved it over there to that desk, that display desk. Well, why don't you guys bring me the bottle that's open? Because I forgot to take it this morning, and I need to take my iodine twice a day. This is not the regular iodine at the store, folks. This is atomic. That's why you get iodine from the store, you put it on paper, it's black. It's bound iodine. This is proprietary. They had to use electricity and sound waves to make it. And there's only one lab in the whole country that can do it. And we've got the corner on the whole deal. And let me tell you, because I had a doctor tell me to get on this stuff like 4 months ago, and it blew me away so much, I basically bought it. And put it out. It turns blue on paper. It's real iodine, folks, like the real iodine crystals. That's why it's lighter and not black. And it just absolutely has done amazing things for my thyroid, my health, and it's helping fund the operation. So InfoWarsLife.com, a great gift to give friends and family. Consult your physician if you have any medical issues first, folks, because you will detoxify. So good. And then we've also got the new fluoride shield. This detoxifies fluoride as well on record, but it's got 5 other compounds with a lighter dose of nascent iodine, so you can take them together with the Shilajit and a bunch of other stuff to really detoxify the body. And I've been on it about 2 months. It just came out, but I had the tester bottles that I approved. And just what it did, stuff coming out of my skin, you name it. I mean, I still look like hell from all the stress I put my body through. People can see on television the difference. I mean, people can see it. So, again, just try it, folks. I'm not going to even make claims here. InfoWarsLife.com. No brag, just fact. You've heard the rave reviews. Or 888-253-3139. But try the new fluoride shield. It's in a 2-ounce bottle and is a lot more inexpensive for the amount you get than even the nascent iodine, the pure nascent iodine. Okay, I'm done plugging for this hour. Let me just recap, if you just joined us, some of the stuff we already covered. Then I'm going to get into the big stacks I haven't hit yet. We do have a Max Keiser coming up on the economy, and we'll take your calls. And then we have Stefan Molyneux getting into world events, always informative. We'll have open phones with him as well. This is really the biggest news of the day, and we've been talking a lot about this, saying historically, this is the type of stuff that starts major world wars. And now it's being called a Cuban Missile Crisis, level situation in the areas in and around Japan, South Korea, and China. They're in the South China Sea. Chinese naval vessel tries to force U.S. warship to stop international waters. And that's Bill Gertz, of course, who also writes for the Washington Times. A Chinese naval vessel tried to force a U.S. guided missile warship to stop international waters recently, causing a tense military standoff in the latest case of Chinese maritime harassment, according to defense officials. Guys, I haven't gotten Gertz on in years. Can we get Bill Gertz on about this or just about the whole situation? He's got big CIA contacts. The guided missile cruiser USS Copens, which recently took part in a disaster relief operation in the Philippines from the typhoon, was confronted by Chinese warships in the South China Sea near Beijing's new aircraft carrier, the Laoying, if I'm pronouncing that right, according to officials familiar with the incident. And basically, we're going to ram them if they didn't get out of the way. This is really becoming a big, big, big issue, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's talk about what else is a big issue. They love to fearmonger about terrorism all day, even though most of these al-Qaeda groups have been funded by our government and others, and that's now been declassified. We're going to cover that in a moment. But when you look at satellite photos now, and I've seen documentaries on this, the whole Earth has giant impact points all over it like the moon. But the moon doesn't have water, doesn't have as much erosion, doesn't have plants growing on it and animals running across it. So you see all the impact points. And we now know because of Shoemaker-Levy, the comet that crashed into one of the gas giants, that these things come through all the Jupiter. They don't come through every 50 million years like the people have just made up out of the air or pulled out of their Obamas. I was going to say their butts, but the point is I'm sorry, with stupid attempts at humor. Now they know these events are happening every couple hundred years. Now that they have the satellites to be able to gauge it and then go in and have archaeologists test the isotopes that are in the rock when these impacts happened. And I've had Levy of the Shoemaker-Levy group on. I've had a lot of these astronomers and scientists on. And they now know that this is an event that happens a lot. That's why a lot of civilizations, they don't even know the names of, and they can't read the writing of, the stone tablets of, were destroyed. And then the few survivors tell the story of fire from the sky. So this is the real type of threat. And then you've got super volcanoes that they know are hundreds of all over the world that are still, they call them dormant, but they're really active. And you've got, anybody who's been to Yellowstone, you see Old Faithful, that's boiling water from the volcanic lava below. The entire park is the cone of a sunken, fallen-in volcano. In the last few years, it's been incredibly active. This is out of the New York Post. And my point is, government's all got us worried about terrorists and stuff, folks. On a scale of, 1 to a billion, it doesn't even show up. Honeybees kill more people than terrorists every year. Look it up. And I'm not saying this is going to blow up on us, but we know volcanoes erupt more often now than scientists previously said. We don't know exactly how often, but it looks like pretty darn often. You end up like people in Pompeii. But I've seen different numbers, but let's just put it this way. This volcano would have an explosion hundreds of times bigger than Krakatoa or Pompeii. Pompeii thousands of years ago. Krakatoa was, 100 and something years ago? The point is that this is not a game. This is not a joke. Hundreds of square miles is the size of the cone. And the last time it blew up, most of the country got covered with ash, just to give you an idea. And let me tell you, this is a big deal. I mean, you got the Chinese and the U.S. and Japan close to war. You got all this crazy stuff going on. And then you got this. And now we know this stuff happens a lot more often than folks thought. Okay? Beneath Yellowstone, a volcano that could wipe out the U.S., it's the awe-inspiring pride of the United States, and it harbors a deadly power that could kill us all. Yellowstone National Park is pristine wilderness, full of scenic landscapes. That's it. I'm going up there. It's a good excuse to go on a road trip with the kids. And iconic hot pools and geysers that attract tens of thousands of visitors every year. But it's what lies beneath that has scientists scurrying. That's a good way to describe it. I'm glad somebody cares. And we've had some of these scientists on over the years. We've long known that Yellowstone is merely the skin top of a supervolcano, a giant pool of magma sitting just under the Earth's surface. Exactly how giant has been the subject of much speculation until now. Dun, dun, dun. A team from the University of Utah, I want them on, guys. I want them on this show next week, please, please, of Utah, have told the American Geological Union fall meeting in San Francisco that Yellowstone's magma chamber is 2.5 times larger than previously thought. It is the underground cavern measuring some 55 miles by 20 miles and containing between 125 and 185 billion cubic miles of molten rock. 185 billion cubic miles. Oh, I'm so scared of Al-Qaeda now. I'm glad they've got armored vehicles on every street corner for us, folks. And that's what always, it's like the song Godzilla by Blue Oyster Cult. Godzilla, that's a metaphor for the earth. I mean, man, I mean, don't you just wish one of these would go off in D.C. sometimes? I mean, I'm being sarcastic. I actually don't wish that because Rand Paul's up there. But the point is that this is a big deal. If it blows, it will wipe out America. Yeah, that's what the scientists have said here before, and have enormous impacts on the rest of the world. Maybe we could have the TSA go out there and just frisk people, and that would make us safe. The university researchers described their discovery as astounding. And really, researchers are fighting the same thing. This is what they've been saying for a decade as it's been heating up. Because, see, they used to think, oh, it goes off every few million years. Now they know it's rising and lowering much faster and is showing evidence it could explode anytime. Anytime. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. Because they don't have a lot of supervolcanoes to study. They have a lot of regular different, the three types, really four types. But they're leaning towards that it's gonna blow up. Is it 10 years, 20 years, 100 years from now? Nobody knows. Round and round she goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Yeah, that's right. In fact, CJ just popped in there and pointed out that they're saying it's overdue, but I'm trying to be conservative here. They'll have CNN announce that I claim that Obama is going to blow up a volcano. You know, a woman called in and said, I think weather weapons could have made the tornadoes hit Oklahoma City. And I said, well, they do have weather weapons, but this probably isn't that. And they turned that into Alex Jones says Obama sent the tornadoes, lying to their victim audience. So I'm not saying it's overdue, even though the scientists say that. And I didn't make the volcano. They'll say, Jones claims that there's a spaceship under the UN building. That's Rachel Maddow. He said that. Okay, continuing. I mean, she said that. The research is part of an ongoing effort to assess the true threat of the molten beast represents. What is a super volcano? Yeah, and then they say eruption due in this article. From analysis of rock and sediment layers, scientists say another eruption is almost due. And that's why there's different views, because they all vary and debate it, at least by geological standards. It appears the supervolcano explodes roughly every 700,000 years. They don't know. 3 such eruptions are known. One was 2.1 million years ago, another 1.3 million years ago. Because again, they can study the isotopes. The most recent was 640,000 years ago. But here's what the scientists have told me, and I haven't read this whole article, so I don't know if they cover it here, because I keep talking about it, and the next page covers what I already it's said before, because we've had the scientist on, is that when you look at these things, they think there's like hiccups, which are, 20, 30, 40, 50 times the size of a Mount St. Helens. So the big eruptions are happening over hundreds of thousands of years, but then it kind of has hiccups. And a hiccup, they think, will destroy the 4-state area around there. So better pray and hope there's a God above, folks. So what would happen if Yellowstone was to erupt? Something close to Armageddon, it goes on to say in the New York Post. Soil samples revealed that the last time it happened, the whole North America was smothered by ash. Okay, I've already covered all this. See, I've already studied this because I'm worried about it, because I'm an extremist. Okay, let's go to another very interesting article here in the science and tech area. Physicists discover clearest evidence yet that the universe is a hologram. They're finding in scientific mapping that there's some type of wavelength system. British scientists found this last year. This is Japanese scientists this time, holding everything together in like an outside projection. So a universe outside the universe containing this verse. And, of course, that's a multiverse that theories of Max Planck and many other quantum mechanics technicians of their time, of course, the most famous of them, Einstein, Simultaneous backup theory that universe is a hologram. There it is out of the Journal of Nature. And black holes are just fissures between those. So, yeah, you know, that's really the greatest crime of the globalists, is that we spend all our time obsessed with them when they really don't even matter and are just idiots. Oh, here's another one. You know, they're coming out with CIA-run press bots that write fake news stories that are given the data or press releases. This is out of Newsfeed. Meet the robot telemarketer who denies she's a robot. Yeah, no, I've gotten calls from these for years. And I talked about this about 2 years ago, where I was arguing, I was calling information because I was driving hands-free and didn't want to, be surfing while I was driving. And I said, no, I want to talk to the operator. And they go, this is the operator. I said, this is a robot. And it started arguing with me. And then I said, that's it, operator, for like a minute. And then a woman came on. So I've already had arguments, and I guarantee you I was part of some beta test, because I tried it again and it never happened, where they were testing this out. The phone call came from a charming woman with bright, engaging voice to the cell phone of a Time Washington Bureau Chief Michael Shearer. She wanted to offer a deal on health insurance, but something was fishy. It's now coming out that they're actually giving your data to telemarketers and people when you do sign up for Obamacare. We already knew that, but that's coming out now. So there you go. Here's another one. Lawmakers who oversee government surveillance programs receive millions from intelligence companies set to make billions off of raping our privacy. Isn't that just sweet? That's out of the Capital City Project. Very important. Just to always point that out. I have some other science news that's really interesting I haven't gotten to yet. But we're going to come back and go to your phone calls this segment and the next. Then Max Keiser at 8 after is going to join us. And then I want to talk about UN confirms chemical arms were used repeatedly in Syria. And then about 7 paragraphs in, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs in, they said no one knows who really did it. Well, that's actually not true. Cy Hirsch and others have now confirmed what we first documented off the al-Qaeda official channels that are their channels, launching the chemical attacks and singing love songs to bin Laden. It's so goofy if they weren't so deadly. Insiders reveal Obama framed Assad for chemical weapons attack, Western Journalism Center. So we've got all that. That's coming up. And then we've got another fraud. I heard a talk show host on WOAI last night. I just happened to dial through things. And they were saying, yeah, people said that hijackers couldn't use cell phones on 9/11. Well, they've been proven wrong now. And people couldn't make calls because now the FAA is working with the FCC and others to allow it. That's when your phone, like on a cruise ship, gets jacked into their system and charges you $5 by the minute. It's working off an antenna on the bottom. Your cell phone doesn't work above 3,000 feet. Try it. But when we found it online, there's a parody video with it, but it is the drug ad, because I heard it on the radio for basically one of these speed drugs they're trying to get the public on. Number one drink now is the 1 hour energy and stuff that's not dangerous, I would say, on average, compared to the pharmaceutical stuff. But whatever happened to good old-fashioned coffee? The average American working 2 jobs, a lot of folks working 3 jobs, and now they want to put people on stuff that basically the military uses. Folks, if you know what speed does, it makes people go crazy. And, of course, when there's more mental illness and more insanity because of big pharma, their answer will be take our guns, take our rights because other people are out of control. That's the collectivist view. You're not an individual. You're a collectivist. Because somebody did something bad on your block, you're going to the gulag too. It's your job to keep your eye on your neighbors. That's the Soviet way. Let's talk to Chris in Delaware. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex Jones.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, long-time listener, first-time caller. I want to touch on a few things. Recently, we had the JFK 50th anniversary. And we don't talk much about us going to the moon. And
that's because I know multiple people that worked at NASA who were good friends of mine. One of them's dead, Raymond Teague, died a few months ago, who were running, cameras on the moon and were there at Mission Control. I can watch the film, see them there in Houston, and they say we went to the moon.
And you believe that?
I've known Raymond Teague for 15 years, and he's one of the sweetest people I ever knew. And he was the real deal and didn't lie about it. He said they would have had to have a whole fake mission in orbit to fool them, but they saw the distance, the time for the radio signals to get there. He said that there was clearly some fake PR photos and stuff put out, they believe, so that people could, see some PR production. But I've talked to Stanley Kubrick's daughter, you name it. He wasn't involved in it. People just make that up and say it with no proof. I mean, look, I just document what I can document. I don't think it really matters at this point. We know they've hoaxed a lot of stuff, but go ahead and make your point about it.
Well, I mean, there's a few videos on YouTube I'm sure you've seen, and even Fox put out a special about how the moon landing could have been a hoax. Now, I'm not saying we did not go to the moon. I'm just saying the way they put it out is not the way I believe we went to the moon.
That's actually what I was told by Dr. Bob Bowman, who's dead now, the former head of the Star Wars program, but he wouldn't talk about it. He said it was classified. I mean, that's the deal. I mean, look, my dad, as a small child, saw bat-winged stealth bombers that are the stealth bombers they rolled out in 1989 or whatever. I saw the stealth fighters outside Dallas fly over and turn their afterburners on when I was like 6, 7 years old. A good 10, 15 years before those came out. So there's a bunch of secret stuff, undoubtedly.
Let me move on to my next point. Have you heard of the elitist called George Green?
I've heard that name. I'd have to refresh my memory. What about it?
Okay. Well, he supposedly...
Oh, yeah, he's the guy in Colorado who got into the meetings, right?
Yes. Why don't you have him on the show?
I have had him on the show. That is a good idea to have him back. I just had to take a second to click. We'll be right back. Max Keiser's coming up to break down the unbelievably important economic trends that are developing, give us a forecast of the end of the year into next year. And I'll bounce off of him some of the heavyweights in the economy that are saying we're in deep trouble. We're also going to break down new news breaking up at Infowars.com. Right now, let's go back to your calls. Robert in California, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. Hi. How you doing, Alex?
I'm pretty good, brother.
Okay, I got something to tell you that you are right about this stuff, about the microphones and the HD cable boxes, the new ones. Oh, man, it was a trip because we got ours like 2 years ago, but you said about that maybe like 4 years ago. Then I seen on Popular Mechanics magazines and all that. Well, I believed it, though. I was like, okay, that's, I mean, the technology is imminent, So, anyway, I was talking to my guitar player 2 years ago, or my drummer, about, we're talking about musical instruments. He goes, what's your favorite guitars? Gibson, Fender, Ibanez, I said. And my computer was not on the internet. As soon as I got off the phone, I turned on my internet. Right there, guitar specials, Gibson, Fender, Ibanez, the same order, which is like,
well,
okay.
I don't know that happened in that case, but Google for 8 years has had a patent and listens to your microphones, cameras. We told you the FBI without warrants dials in and uses the cameras and microphones. They allowed the Washington Post last week. Like they had to get permission to admit that the FBI is committing crimes. I mean, imagine being that big of a toady. Look, I busted open a Scientific Atlantic cable box. The video of it somewhere like 15, 16 years ago, like 1998 if memory serves, on cable access TV and showed people the frickin' microphone that was not in any use then, quote, for interactive stuff. Now there's cameras, microphones. I got an article today about mannequins in the stores have face scanning cameras hidden in them. They're going to roll out with flying dust that can shoot footage of you soon as things keep miniaturizing in just a few years. They already have it. The Pentagon, flies over with a drone, releases 1,000 little bug bots that are electronic and go around and can even, crawl in your ear and have small explosive and detonate and blow your head off or deliver a bioweapon. And people are like, man, that's science fiction. It's 2013, boys and girls. And the globalists are 35, 40 years ahead. So it's 2050, 2045. We think we're in 2013. Do you understand that, folks? We're not in 2013. We're in 2045, 2050, and that's the best I can tell from all my intel sources. It's the year 2045. That's a way to get our minds around this. And, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you talk about how they torture people's kids in front of them at black bases, dark bases, secret bases, ghost bases, all over the world, and it's because they like to. And then they brag in the news to introduce it there many times, like, yeah, we we brought their kids in and did some stuff, and they answered the questions about where Al-Qaeda was at. That's all just made up. They're just telling you they did that to introduce it into your mind like a virus, that torturing a kid's a good thing. And all these sitcoms and dramas and movies in England and Germany and the U.S. and 24, all those shows, how many plots, you can look them up, where they torture kids. Before 9/11, I was reading a law enforcement magazine. I think it was SWAT magazine. And it was a terrorist who's going to release something like 20 anthrax bombs. You can go look it up. I don't remember the exact number. He's going to detonate them. It's going to kill thousands unless you torture his 12-year-old son. And then the article went on to say, go ahead and torture him. You're going to save people. And they were infecting the cops' minds. And again, I was in a 7-Eleven, grabbed the magazine randomly. Don't read those cop magazines very often. Opened it up, and it was how to torture a 12-year-old boy in front of daddy when a militia guy is going to release anthrax. Now, about a year and a half later, the globalists launched 9/11 and launched the anthrax. It's all just pre-programming, and the cops are all reading this, and it's just turning them into evil demons. Because their authority figure, they're picked because they follow orders, their authority figure says, well, you know what they did to Abu Ghraib? They raped children in front of their parents. The truth is they just like to rape children. I mean, these are demons. Where he talked about how he had trailblazed the path for his son to run for president, and how he's now wrapped his mind around the idea of Rand becoming president and helping to restore the republic. But he covered a whole bunch of other issues on the economy, how it's doomed to implode by design under fiat banking. It was just, I think, the best interview I've ever done with Ron Paul. And I'm on his show, by the way, Monday. And we'll be posting that at Infowars.com. But Ron Paul interview will be posted with the video in the next hour at Infowars.com. Paul Watson wrote an article this morning. White House front group vows to target alternative media. And I don't cover what Media Matters does because they're a powerful group. I cover them because they're such an anti-American group and such a window into the open treason and open manipulation of the media that's going on. The White House brags, and Media Matters brags, that they have weekly meetings. They have a bunch of former White House officials that run it, that run Media Matters. And the reason it matters is not that their website that no one hardly visits, no one even listens to, they're a laughingstock, a joke. They got a bunch of trendies, wearing miscolored socks on there as camouflage to make themselves look non-threatening. They're actually a PSYOP core on record. And the head of it packs heat and is all paranoid but doesn't want you to be able to own guns. I mean, it's classic. I'm talking about David Brock, of course. These are not liberals. These are authoritarians. And the reason this story is important, and we're going to go to Max Keiser, who we're getting on the line right now. You never know where he's at. It could be Cairo. It could be Russia. It could be England. It could be the U.S. I'll ask him where he's at when he comes on with us in a minute. The reason I mention this is I co-wrote this article this morning with Paul Watson. It's got some quotes by me in there. White House front group vows to target alternative media. Well, the memo came out 3 years ago that they would actually get jobs in the media to sabotage them from within. So it's a paramilitary group, basically. And they go on to say Media Matters set to intensify attacks against Drudge, InfoWars, in concert with Obama advisors. They've had the Pentagon come out and freak out over DrudgeReport.com, and they're freaked out over WorldNetDaily.com and Infowars.com over anybody who aren't just total authoritarians. It's not about left or right. It's about not being an authoritarian because we're hurting them so bad. Now, they delusionally claim victory over Fox News, who's full of its own brands of propaganda, and say they've defeated them with George Soros, who funds them. Fox News is bigger than ever. CNN, MSNBC are imploding. But the reason this is so important is that I've seen it, before they even admitted it in the last few years, where there'll be an attack on Media Matters, and then word for word on CNN or MSNBC, it comes out, and now they brag to the Huffington Post, and that's linked here, that they indeed do run CNN and MSNBC. Now, why doesn't the White House just send it over? Well, that's so illegal, especially when they're getting stimulus money and MSNBC and other things, and their parent companies are getting bailout money. It's already so illegal. It's still illegal what they're doing, clearly, according to federal and state law and just common sense, that they have to have this pass-through group of interns, basically, that the White House, they have weekly meetings, passes them the talking point and emails them daily the talking point, and so you can tell who they're upset about. DrudgeReport.com, Infowars.com, they run around like chickens with their heads cut off, on a daily basis bleeding out politically. They literally are chickens with their heads cut off. Because a chicken with its head cut off really does run around with blood spurting till they pump out and then they fall over dead. But a chicken can run around for several minutes. And they are, or if you've ever worked as an exterminator, I did this for just a few months. It made me feel too bad. I quit doing it, obviously. One summer, I worked on the ranch, and the next summer they had me working as an exterminator. Point is, when you spray a bunch of roaches down under a house in a crawl space, they start having sex. And that's basically what these people are doing. They're just running around declaring victory, rearranging deck chairs, polishing silverware, throwing each other, politically on the table and humping each other. I mean, this is basically what's going on. Declaring delusional victory. It's like Hitler in the bunker, commanding armies that didn't exist. And they've now declared victory over Fox. That's like they've declared victory over the sun or something. It's totally out of their power. And but you have to understand, this is the White House. This is directly the White House that doesn't want to look pathetic and weird, countering us, so they have this little chicken running around bleeding out doing it, but it's literally like a Mars rover of the White House. And they're listening right now. They admit they're listening. They write articles about us every week. I mean, it is a badge of honor, you twits. It's like the Brady campaign came out and said, ban all the guns. Alabama gets a failing score for not banning them. Yeah, they got a low crime rate compared to places that have banned the guns. It's a badge of honor. You don't control reality. You don't dictate. Oprah Winfrey doesn't call people racist that don't like Obamacare. Go to Hades, Oprah. Don't play your race card, you race pimp. We're all in a rebellion against the banksters. Left, right, center, we don't care. We want freedom. We want currency freedom. We want individual freedom. We want travel freedom. And we know what's happening. And now joining us for the rest of the hour, very honored to have him join us, always extremely informative. MaxKeiser.com is his site to find all things Max Keiser. He's a filmmaker, broadcaster, and a former broker and options trader. He invented the Hollywood Stock Exchange by Counter and Fitzgerald. That ended up being the model of many of the virtual trading systems adopted today. And he's got shows on RT, BBC. The list just goes on and on. I want to get his take on Faber, all the big economists, Rogers, that just keep being right, saying what he's been saying. This next year is the big one. We're already in a global recession/depression, depending on where you are. And the QE Unlimited is screwing things up. If they cut it off, it's going to blow up. Max predicted what would happen in the bond market, now in the stock market. I want to get his take on all that. Then we'll look at Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. Then we'll look at a bunch of other news and take your phone calls. But Max Keiser, the man that coined the term the casino gulag economy, which really, I think, aptly describes where we're going, joins us now. Max Keiser, thank you so much for coming on. Where are you right now?
Hey, Alex. I'm in London. I'm in London in the UK, where there's what we're having here now is the Chinese people are buying up London, and they're moving in. They're buying the purchases of assets in London by the Chinese is skyrocketing. And the government here in the UK, including the mayor of London, Boris Johnson, is over in China selling London to the Chinese. And billions are pouring into this town from the Chinese because the Chinese government is printing $200 billion a month in quantitative easing. You know, in the United States, they do $85 billion a month at the Federal Reserve. People are aghast at how much money they're printing every month. And of course, that's why you have this asset price explosion in things like art and diamonds and other assets. Well, in China, they're printing $200 billion a month, and they're taking all that money and they're buying real estate in London. And of course, the people who live here can't afford to live here anymore. So you see now people are moving into containers, you know, the containers on a container ship. They're stacking those up, and people are moving into those as a container ship container.
So literally the fiat money selectively being pumped out by governments to build new high-rises for themselves are then driving up the price of everything else for everyone else. So it's a selective inflation, but it's starting to spill over.
Yeah, it's asset price inflation from all that free money printing to keep the zombie banks alive, but somehow it never makes it into the economy in terms of rising or raising wages. So here in the UK, again, as an example, wages are growing at less than 1% a year. And meanwhile, the understated inflation rate by the government, they say it's at 2.8% a year. But if you add
What is the goal of the technocrats? To lower wages while increasing prices, drive everyone into total submission, create social disorder, then bring in police state as the answer? That was the leaked World Bank plan 2002.
Well, I mean, if you were in their position, you would do the same thing. You would print lots of money and then make sure that instead of having it flow to every part of the economy, causing inflation throughout the economy, if you could direct it to just those assets that you own, like art, diamonds or minerals and things like that, then you've got the best of both worlds. You've got your little private bank, the central banks printing money, and you pocket all that free cash, and you keep your zombie bank alive. And the zombie bank, of course, is laundering all your drug money. That just came out again that the UK banks are involved in billions of dollars of laundering Mexican drug money. And they need cheap money to do that. They need to be able to hide that money and to move that money around cheaply. And so this is the game. And the loss of living standards here in the UK is as sharp as it's been since the Victorian era. Living standards here in the UK are collapsing.
I want to get into all these different stories and factoids that you're bringing up and what's happening geopolitically with Russia threatening to nuke Europe if they continue to move weapon systems in against their borders, what's happening in China. I mean, these are the times historically, World War I, World War II, studying history, the last time the world acted like this, the last time there was this type of economic mismanagement going on, things basically imploded, Max Keiser. Give us the big picture before you zoom in to the localized stories. Break down what you see happening in the bond market, stock markets. I'm starting to see more and more inflation, even if they try to contain it and only give themselves the wealth. What do you see happening?
Well, I think there's a couple of obvious hotspots. One would be in the North Pole region, where Canada just last week decided that they own the North Pole. Russia is very active in the North Pole.
They've both declared they're going to have a race. They're both claiming, in fact, this week that they own it now.
Right. Norway is also making claims. So the North Pole is becoming a hot zone. China and Russia are now actively engaged in a hot war. We talked about this on your show 9 months ago, and at that time it seemed a bit far-fetched. But now you've got really things heating up. China and Japan, excuse me. So they're seemingly ready to start firing shots at each other. And I think it all goes back to what we've been talking about on your show for a number of years now, which is that the bond market has been going up for 30 years, starting with really go back to Reagan and Thatcher, who brought about the whole era of deregulation and derivatives, which allowed for this enormous 30-year bull market in bonds, which is now coming to an end. That means that the era of cheap money or cheap credit is coming to an end. So now, instead of just using financial instruments to gain property and treasure, we're going back to the old tried and true war. War is the old way of getting...
Well, that was my next question. They're now announcing in the U.S., Europe, England, the bail-in, the new form of taxation where they just take the money directly out of your account and give it to private interest, or they take your national park and give it to a private interest. Even though the private interest is the one that's in debt, they've just gotten the government to sign on to their debt. Absolutely amazing. In fact, here's Kurt Nemo's headline on it, breaking it down up on Infowars.com. IMF wants 71% tax rate, and it says old-fashioned taxation is out. Expect outright grand larceny at the local enforcement by government. And they actually say in all these white papers, what you've talked about, they're going to impoverish us till we're literally starving, living in shacks like Mexico City. And then they're going to be behind big fences in huge armored ground-based elysiums, literal Greek elysiums, or the golden fields of the gods, or the chosen humans brought up to be gods is really what Elysium really is. And then they're behind. I mean, it's literally the Hunger Games.
Yeah, well, it's back to medievalism, and that's the way it was for hundreds of years. The only thing that gave rise to the middle class, Alex, historically, was the bubonic plague. It wiped out half the population in Europe. Lords needed to pay serfs more because there was a competition for labor suddenly for the first time.
And lords were in the dangerous cities, and most of them died from fleas, whereas the peasants out in the country survived in higher numbers. It was actually a wiping out of the elite, I believe, from the numbers that helped the best. But you're right about the rate of increased pay. Yeah,
so that was really the basis in the beginning of the middle class as we know it today. and was due to that plague. Now, the aristocrats and the monarchs, they never bought into the whole idea of having a middle class. I mean, they're using this opportunity to take us back into the medieval times. They would much prefer having lords and serfs. They would much prefer having aristocrats.
In fact, Bilderberg says that. They say they want to bring back neo-serfdom. You're absolutely right.
Well, that they prefer it. I mean, if you were one of the aristocrats, you would rather have your minions toiling for you and having lavish parties. That's just human nature. So that's what they're returning to. They have the capability of doing this now and using what we talked about on your show last time, interest rate apartheid, which maybe is an apt phrase with the recent Nelson Mandela funeral. Apartheid is back on people's minds. And the interest rate apartheid is basically that if you are one of a Goldman Sachs partner, you can borrow money at 0%. But if you're out in the field, you're a serf, you're one of the working slaves, you can't borrow money for less than 20%, 25%. If you go to a payday lender here in the UK, you can be charged as much as 5,000% annualized rates of return to borrow money. So that's a way to keep the poor. And if you can borrow money at 0% and you can speculate by buying a building or a fine work of art and see if that goes up and have the benefit of, if it crashes, being bailed out by the government, then you've got riskless returns for your risk-free money, and everyone else has got to earn wages that are not even 1/3 the rate of inflation.
I want to show viewers a couple articles here that I've got. Radio listeners can just go to Infowars.com and see them. One's from Zero Hedge. Market valuation has lost every anchor to real world, says David Stockman, top advisor to Ronald Reagan. Here's another one out today from Economic Collapse blog on Infowars.com. Dent, Faber, Salente, Maloney, Rogers. What do they say is coming in 2014? And then it's got a bunch of other Oak Capital, Howard Marks, financial editor Jeff Bruick, a whole bunch of other top people, Robert Schiller. This article is really powerful because it shows scores of really smart guys that have been accurate. And they're basically saying what you're saying. They're saying 2014, we're going to see the big fireworks. We've seen a slow slide so far, but because they've got all these computers and fraudulent systems, they've suspended economic reality. But you can't suspend markets forever. And the word is, once it breaks through, it could go Zimbabwe, Weimar Republic, or it could go into total depressionary free fall. I mean, bottom line, Ron Paul was here yesterday, and he said it's key to get the word out that the insider crony capitalists did this, or they're going to use this collapse to bring in total state-run systems while they sit offshore working the levers of state control, and they're above the law with diplomatic immunity and are the recipients of the socialism they bring in as the answer to their crony capitalism. So how do we navigate this, and what do you say to your peers here basically saying what you're saying, and give us an economic weather report here?
Well, the phrase, markets are not tied to anything. So let's just dive into that for a second and talk about what that means. So markets are trading on expected valuations in the near future or medium-term future based on corporations' ability to make profits and make earnings. What we find out in the last 20 years is that most of the profits made by corporations are being made by gaming their cash positions using derivatives, and that these derivatives, which are just financial bets, are collateralized by less and less substantive worthy collateral. And you see proof of this in the global sovereign bond market, because the best collateral you could put up to speculate is a AAA sovereign bond. Over the past 10 or 15 years, the number of sovereigns that have AAA credit is dropping. America no longer has a AAA credit. It was cut by one of the agencies from a AAA status. And that gives you an indication. So this phrase, markets aren't based on anything. What it means basically is that the collateral upon which all this leverage is based is eroding in real time. And we get to a point where there is no there. There is no collateral. There has no resale value at all. If you were to have to resell Citibank or JP Morgan or Royal Bank of Scotland or Barclays Bank in the open market based on a mark-to-market accounting, based on what they actually have on their books and their balance sheet, the sum total you could get in the open market for those assets is zero. As a matter of fact, it's negative because they have hundreds of times more debt than they have in equity. And the only thing that's keeping it alive are these cheap interest rates by guys like Mark Carney, Janet Yellen, and Ben Bernanke, who keep these banks afloat by printing scads and scads of 0% money. But instead of buttressing the economy by offering ways to build new companies that are offering real jobs, it's going straight into speculation on real estate, fine art, and all these other assets that all it does is make that top 1/10 of 1% aggregate an ever higher concentration of this free money. And you end up with this chasm effect of absolute wealth concentration at the very top versus everyone else who's in abject poverty. Now, as far as Mark Faber and these other fine folks who are predicting this next year as being the year of Armageddon, I would posit that we are already seeing that in the emergence of these cryptocurrencies, because the cryptocurrencies are already telling us that these asset values are crashing. It's not that Bitcoin is up at 2,000%. It's that these asset values that they say are worth something are collapsing by 2,000%. That's the message of Bitcoin. So we're seeing it right now. That's my position.
We're going to get into Bitcoin because I know you're a leading expert on that coming up in the next segment, and then go to phone calls. I know I gave the number out and haven't gone to some of the calls yet this hour. Your calls are coming up. Thomas, William, Greg, Ryan, Larry, Max Keiser can speak to any of your questions. But we're to try to get to you, so be brief when we come back so we can get to the next person, 800-259-9231. We're going to break here in just a moment. But, Max, all I know is that they've made a conscious decision to basically engage in systematic institutional fraud to take over the entire civilization in an act of economic conquest. But I don't know how the power structure thinks they're going to escape the blowback in a culture and a society they live in of something this degrading. I mean, the rules of nature and nature's God show that they will end up being torn limb from limb, probably physically, for what they've done, but undoubtedly culturally. We'll be right back with Max Keiser. I'm Alex Jones. Stay with us. In fact, that's like the song War Pigs with Black Sabbath. Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Evil minds. And then there's a line in there about politicians hide themselves away. They only started the war. Treating people just like pawns in chess. Wait till their judgment day comes. Yeah. Trying to remember the lines there. And that's what it comes down to in the final equation. You guys print me the lines to War Pigs. We're going to go back to Max Keiser here in just a moment. I want to shift gears with him, but we'll do that here in just a second, then take your phone calls. You can follow him, of course, on Twitter at Max Keiser. Follow us at Twitter at Real Alex Jones. His site's maxkeiser.com. Our sites are prisonplanet.com and Infowars.com. And really invaluable info continually out of the mind of Max Keiser. Briefly, Christmas is almost here, and you not only get some of the best products out there at a very low price, you support the broadcast and vote with your dollars or your euros or however you're purchasing products from us. It's free association. It's what built civilization. It's what created the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. We're battling for the middle class. We're battling for quality. We're battling for productivity and prosperity. If I was a top globalist, I would not be trying to dumb people down. I'd be like Henry Ford. Didn't agree with a lot of stuff Henry Ford said, but I did agree with paying his industrial workers, in some cases, 10 times what other workers were paid. And you know why? He had a plan. He said, if we start paying people a lot, it'll just raise the quality of civilization, and we can just industrialize everyone and make everyone rich. He wanted to be the king of an incredibly industrialized society and an agrarian society. He wanted to empower farmers. That's not how these people think. And his thought was basic Renaissance economics. He didn't invent that. You could sell more cars if people are being paid a lot. But see, that's been our economy. They're getting us away from that now. And their argument is it's bad for the earth. Well, you can argue that all day. The point is they're exempting themselves from the rules of this. You shouldn't be able to fly, but I've got 10 aircraft. I'm Al Gore. I'm a socialist. I want higher taxes, but I'm exempt in France. We're going to go back to Max Keiser here in a moment. The point is our products fund our operation, and they're the very best. If I find coffee I absolutely love, I go find out where they're getting it, and I go get my own blend of it, get coffee even better. Grown in southern Mexico in the high mountains, 100% shade-grown Arabica, beyond fair trade. Wake Up America blend, very affordably priced. We have the immune system support. We have the fluoride shield that has 6 compounds, including nascent iodine, in a double-sized bottle. So it's a massive discount. And it just all works to detoxify the body. And then you can also take it with the nascent iodine to supercharge it. I'd plug the Super Male Vitality, but it's basically sold out for about 6 weeks till we get more. But it's all available at InfoWarsLife.com. No brag, just fact. You hear the rave reviews. We don't screen your calls, folks. People are blown away. I'm not going to sell you something that didn't blow my socks off, okay? Whenever I went out and, developed this with top doctors and scientists and then, started taking it for a few months before. Let me tell you, just wait till you take it. I mean, the coffee's great. May not be your favorite because taste varies. People are like, whoa, this is really good coffee. And it's the same thing with all of it. InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. And you can give the gift of fluoride detoxification and so many other issues, or a nice bag of quality coffee roasted in Colorado, grown in southern Mexico. Helps the farmers all around. InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsStore.com, or MadeIn1776.com is our Made in America brand of high-quality apparel and bronze and nickel belt buckles with the terrorist George Washington on them and pro-Second Amendment stuff. It's pretty dirty, folks. It's pretty nasty. Pretty bad stuff there. It's the type of stuff that made the U.S. have half the world's wealth with 5% of the population. It's really terrible. Okay, anyways, it's freedom. It's very horrible. I apologize again. Anyways, InfoWarsLife.com. Going back to Max Keiser. Max, here's the question I'm trying to get across to you. The elite are acting like they don't care anymore. It's like Nero marrying, or I guess it was Caligula married his horse, and Nero, burning down half the city for fun while he played his fiddle. They don't care anymore across the board. It's getting crazier and crazier and crazier. The looting, the stealing, the cop shooting some guy because the guy laughs at him. The cop doesn't get in trouble. I mean, it just seems like not just the elite, the public are going crazy with this unnatural system. There are drug ads now pushing, amphetamines they give fighter pilots that 3 days of it makes you go crazy. I mean, what's happening in this mass mental craziness? How do the elite think they're going to get away with all this, Max Keiser?
I'll give you a new concept to chew on. The virtuous cycle versus the vicious cycle. Now, you mentioned Henry Ford a minute ago. Henry Ford, being an industrialist and an economist, realized he could create a virtuous cycle by stimulating demand for his automobiles by raising the wages of his workers. Now, when he raised the wages of his workers, he did so by raising their cash in their paycheck. Now, flash forward to 2013 and a vicious cycle. Central bankers like Mark Carney here in the UK say they want to stimulate demand, just like Henry Ford wanted to. How do they do it? Not by increasing people's cash, by giving people more access to debt. They increase demand by increasing debt. And the reason this is a vicious cycle is because that debt has interest costs associated with it. And the more you go into debt, the more interest costs you incur, and the slippery slope down into poverty you go. And we see that vicious versus virtuous play out on a cultural sense. When you have a group of people who now have access to interest-free money and minions that'll work for free, who are dying to get themselves greater into debt. They'll stumble over each other. They'll stab each other at Walmart the day after Thanksgiving to increase their debt load. When you have people that foolish, you become cruel. You become evil. You enjoy then watching these gladiator shoppers kill each other to increase your rent income because you're selling them the access to more debt. And it creates a social class of very cruel and sadistic overlords. And this is what rules in America, around Europe, and in the UK.
Devastatingly put. And man, gladiator shoppers, that is a great way to describe these people. And they have an EBT malfunction in Louisiana where people can buy unlimited. They were just throwing random things in their baskets. They didn't even care. I mean, it's like annoying to have to go to the store and buy stuff when you've lost it or broke it. I hate having to go buy new stuff, but I see other people just absolutely getting off on it. And I'm not against materialism. It's just that if it's at the top of your needs, you're really a slave to it, Max. And I see it as one of the historical indicators of a society in decline. And more and more I realize, Max, I don't think we're going to be able to pull out of this. How do we as individuals protect ourselves? Do we have an economic revolution? Vote with our dollars? Do you think it's Bitcoin? Because I want to ask you, I see Bitcoin is good, you know, an anarchic, open cryptocurrency. My problem is J.P. Morgan Chase, as you know, in 1999 had a patent on it. How do we know they're not behind it? How do we know they don't discredit the whole thing by blowing up their own system? Or how do we know they don't take it over if it isn't theirs? And it does have a little bit of a Farmville casino gulag look to it, how everyone's out there mining it and like mad if you don't totally lay down and love it. I mean, I'm just kind of ambiguous on Bitcoin and have a bad feeling in my stomach. You have a good feeling. I guess a tingle up your leg if you were Slimeball Chris Matthews.
Well, you run ads for Bitcoin on your show. So presumably, if you believe in your advertisers, you would believe in the Bitcoin story.
No. They're on the network ads. Any ad you hear, I endorse. I have my advertising. That's part of how I'm paid by the network, and then they have theirs. But I'm not here running. I let you come on and promote Bitcoin. I'm really trying to understand it. So you heard my question.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree that it's difficult to, it doesn't have a warm and fuzzy quality about it that you can easily embrace. It's very kind of difficult to fathom because there's many moving parts to it. But it's based on encryption, and encryption gave us Edward Snowden, who was a tremendous whistleblower, should have been Time Person of the Year, and revealed an incredible amounts of documents that are still being revealed that are completely playing havoc in the halls of power around the world. That's all based on encryption. You've got guys like Kim.com in New Zealand, who was taken down by the MPAA with a SWAT team assault.
No, I get it. These are revolutionary Guy Fawkes in every sense of the way.
Okay, so let me carry this through. So encryption is the key to understanding what makes Bitcoin appealing. And it's based on an encryption technology, and the inventors of it figured out that to make sure that these coins were not double spent, you could incentivize people to prove that the coins were all being accounted for by giving them a piece of the coins as they were being created, so to speak, and then you end up with this currency called Bitcoin. And initially, it was a curiosity amongst the technology groups, but since situations like Cyprus happened, where you had the bail-ins that you mentioned earlier, people are looking for a place to store value. Gold and silver are problematic because, number one, the prices are being manipulated through artificial selling, and it's hard to move a lot of gold and silver. It's very heavy and it's obvious to see. Where you could put $100,000 on a thumb drive or in a Mind wallet or a paper wallet and walk across any border and take your money with you. That's what a lot of Chinese people are doing who are escaping China.
Sure. Or a few collector coins or some art that the idiot TSA doesn't know is worth $5 million.
Okay, so let's go back, go into this J.P. Morgan situation, because I agree with you that is problematic, because they came out this week and said that they were renewing a patent that they have on virtual currencies. As you know, I'm the only one in the world that has 4 patents on virtual currencies, particularly the key patent 5951760.
And you are the creator of Bitcoin.
No, I'm not. Bitcoin is an evolution in virtual currencies from what I did in the 90s to now this cryptocurrency. It's a really remarkable break and an achievement in the field of virtual currencies. But I know this area very well.
Oh.
And so you've got this J.P. Morgan that's trying to resurrect some old patents. And this is what I see is going to happen. J.P. Morgan and others will try to stop Bitcoin by engaging in a patent war or a copyright war, the same way the record industry has tried to stop file sharing of music by attacking people on the basis of their violating copyright law. So I think J.P. Morgan and these other banks will use patent law to try to disrupt the flow of Bitcoin. They don't have a case. It's their patents don't really compete with Bitcoin. But
look how Congress just passed a law banning the printing of 3D guns. I mean, I really don't see how they can do that. Right. I don't see them, they're using technology to enslave us, but I don't see them being able to block us using technology to empower us, just like they can't shut down the alternative media. That only makes us that much hotter. So how do you see them trying to win?
Well, I think they'll try to attack the merchants and the exchanges by, and you know, they just passed, or they're in the process of passing these global trade deals like TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. That gives corporations if you looked into this, I'm sure you covered it on your show recently.
Above government power.
Totally above government power. So they can say that this patent that JP Morgan claims to have dominion over is now going to be applied through the corporate powers of TTP globally. And anyone who tries to do a merchant deal or an exchange, we're going to attack them claiming a patent violation. It'll be a completely spurious suit. It'll be a patent troll suit. There'll be no merit whatsoever, but it'll be backed by billions of dollars. And remember, in the case of copyright in the MPAA, they chased Chris Dodd of the MPAA, hounded Aaron Swartz to the point where he killed himself. They'll stop.
Oh, they really killed him. He was getting married and everything.
They killed him. His father said at the funeral that the government hounded my son to death. So anyway, that's Chris Dodd. He's a murderer, but he's typical American politician. I don't think anyone should be surprised about that. That's what they.
Well, I want to say this: the ruling elite are getting more and more lazy, and that's why I think we're going to end up having a giant war. I mean, bottom line, where do you see this going? Because Bitcoin has survived. I want to go to calls. It has survived some big plunges to go back up. I just see it like the tulip mania or something, where it's getting a little bit foaming at the mouth here.
I think the analogy to tulips is incorrect. Tulips, you really can't make the comparison at all. For a lot of reasons, but the price appreciation is really the first inning.
Okay, well, what about derivatives? I mean, what about derivatives? I mean, I get what gives Bitcoin its value. I know it's an agreed upon mode of exchange, and so I want to shadow the power of the Federal Reserve. It's just that intrinsically, people say, well, are you for gold back? Or are you for fiat currencies? Well, I can debate both systems openly. I'm not wedded to one or the other. Anything's better than what we've got right now if people are educated about it and the amount of it's controlled and it's transparent, right?
The Bitcoin is a Bitcoin protocol. If I held in my hand 100,000 emails and I said, Alex, what is the intrinsic value of these emails?
Depends on what's in them.
The answer is zero. That has no intrinsic value.
No, those emails, if it's actual email data or the email... Well, no, it may be who you're contacting.
They have no intrinsic value. It's just bits and bytes and electrons. There's no intrinsic value. But in the network of email, to be able to communicate information around the world and collect information, et cetera, it's worth incalculable amount of money.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
Similarly with Bitcoin, the intrinsic value case has to do with the protocol, which is applied across the global network, incalculably valuable as a protocol to send money. For example, is the most widespread use of the Bitcoin protocol.
So the value is the encryption.
Is the network, the encrypted network, and the ability to verify transactions. So it's the protocol. So you have to look at it like email, or you look at it like P2P file swapping. That's one way to look at the intrinsic value case of Bitcoin. And it's like the internet in 1994.
How high do you think Bitcoin's going to go? How high do you think Bitcoin's going to go?
I think the smartest guy in the Bitcoin space is a guy named in Stockholm, Sweden. He's founded the Swedish Pirate Party. His name is Rick Falkvinja, and he made the case that Bitcoin could capture between 1% and 10% of the global forex market. That's the foreign exchange market, which it has an implied value per Bitcoin of between 100,000 and $1 million per Bitcoin.
You said he was.
He is. He's the smartest guy.
Well, I want to get him on.
Yes, you should. He is a fantastic guest.
Well, give me his contact info. I'm sure.
Rick Falkvinja. He's a fantastic guest. He's one of the earliest supporters. He invented the Swedish Pirate Party, and he's a great guy. There's a couple of other people you should have on. Like
no, I've read it. Well, send me a list. Send me who you recommend we have on, Keiser.
He writes for Forbes magazine. He's an excellent spokesperson. Roger Ver, who's the Jesus of Bitcoin, who gave away Bitcoin for years just to get people to understand what it's all about. He just gave $1 million away to the Mises Institute.
Beautiful. Yeah, and folks are buying Lamborghinis or whatever with them now. It's amazing. Why just let the Federal Reserve guys and a bunch of old bankers have this power? Yeah,
we want Federal Reserve. We don't need them.
We're going to come back and take calls in this segment and the next. And Stefan Molyneux scheduled to be with us. We're going to come back with Thomas, William, Greg, Ryan, and Larry. Obama keeps his bodyguards. You turn your guns in. Doesn't that sound like a good deal? Ryan in Kentucky, you're on the air with your question or comment for the world at large. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I'd like to raise 2 points. Number one would be for any and everybody listening to this broadcast, borrowing money to pay debt is about as idiotic as sticking your hand in a fire. My second point is this. For some time now, people like yourself and others have reported that there are foreign troops training inside the United States borders.
It's all over the place. They're just acclimating us for occupation, yeah.
Yes, sir. Several men and I, men of, let's just say, experience, have taken it upon ourselves to investigate this in our own state. We have personally witnessed close to 3,000 Russian troops are training in the state of Kentucky. We have also witnessed no more than 40 so far, but UN troops that are training in Kentucky. People need to wake up and look around.
You know, you should shoot video of that, put it on YouTube, and it become a big story. They're training Russian, German, you name it, and then training them for urban warfare in America. And in NLE 09, the Pentagon admitted that FEMA drill that they were training foreign troops for unrest in America. And we have deals with Canada and Mexico to help them as well. And it really is just a slow incremental acclimation. Thank you so much for the call, sir. And good point on the debt. Max Keiser, I've seen cases where they have like Ukrainian troops in Scotland running checkpoints. What do you think all this is really about?
In Paris, they have Romanian police that are stopping Romanian so-called gypsies because there's an influx of them. So they're allowing the Romanian police to set up shop inside Paris, inside France. So, which is a remarkable development, I think. I think Mark Carney is a Bank of Canada central banker. They just dropped him into Bank of England. It buttresses your point about this new world order, about this globalist agenda. So the elite in these different countries are just plug and play. They're just snap and go. They just drop them in from any country to any other country. There's no sovereignty anymore. It doesn't make any difference what country you're in. You can just drop in elites from any country to any other country as long as they do your bidding.
Continuity of agenda.
Exactly.
Let's jam in one more. Boy, you put it well, Max. William in North Carolina. Go ahead. Quick question or comment.
My question is about CISPA numbers. I've been seeing on the net where they're being used on birth certificates, Social Security cards, court cases.
You know, Max is a real expert on this. I appreciate it. Let me jump in real because we're going to break. Max, they do use individuals in countries in the IMF and World Bank as collateral, correct?
Well, inadvertently, we're all collateral for the central banks, one way or another.
But I've heard you quantify this before because I've seen it where they call us human resources and they really are assigning whole populations on through debt to this too big to fail, correct?
Yeah, all of your Twitter activity is now collateralized and used to underwrite debt because they can say it has predictive qualities, which they can underwrite.
All right, 5 more minutes with Keiser. Stay with us. Final segment with a few final calls with Max Keiser. Then we're going to have another guest coming on and a drug ad I want to play on air and get Stefan Molyneux' take on. We're going to go back to a few callers here and continue with others on in the next hour. I guess Greg's up next, and then Danny and a few. No, Danny's not up next. It's William, and then I'm totally confused now. No, it's Greg. I'm seeing who's been holding the longest, and then it'll be Joe. But Max Keiser, anything else you'd like to add? Important points that you've forgotten to get out there to folks.
Well, you mentioned earlier the group of people. I just want to reiterate this point. Mark Faber and others that are talking about 2014 being a watershed year to the turning point in market chaos. And I just want to reiterate that I'm putting my flag in the ground and saying that Bitcoin is the phenomenon happening this year. And next year we'll look back on 2013 and realize that Bitcoin was the black swan. Bitcoin was the disruptive event that totally transformed the global economy. And we won't be able to make that statement until this time next year, looking back and say that's truly what happened. But I just want to make sure I go on record as saying that I believe that all those people are correct. I believe they're missing the true elephant in the room, and that is Bitcoin.
They're missing the Bitcoin factor.
I believe they are because they sense that there is this epic change coming. I've talked about it on your show many times, as many have. But I think that the emergence of cryptography, as it has changed the surveillance industry, changed the global alliances, is bleeding into currencies, and that's a huge event. It's the biggest event in currencies in hundreds of years.
Well, when you've got 85 to 1, 100 to 1, 200 to 1, profit to loss ratios, or you've got stock ratios where the company's making no money, but it's valued 100 times its supposed profits, we're in deep trouble. Here's that Dave Stockman clip that we talked about from Bloomberg. And the thing is, now what we talk about is even invading dinosaur media. Here it is.
All right. If ever I had a guy, you're my budget guy, tell me your impressions after combing through some of the numbers of what has been put forth by both parties yet to be voted on.
Well, first, let's be clear. It's a joke and a betrayal. It's the final surrender of the House Republican leadership to beltway politics and to kicking the can and ignoring this budget monster that's hurtling down the road. They're busting the caps, and it's totally unnecessary. It's going to add $70 billion to spending this year and next year, and then they're going to pretend to save it in 22 and 23.
All right, that's a CNBC clip where he's saying something similar. Let me actually read what he said here. He said on Bloomberg, it's in our article, market valuation has lost every anchor to the real world. He wanted to say that this kind of speculative froth that you get at the top of a cycle where valuation loses any anchor in the real world, loses any anchor in the real world. That video's up on Infowars.com. This is what we're talking about here. So they can't criticize Bitcoin claiming it's not connected to anything when what they're pushing is connected to a bunch of debt that we know has negative value and was based in fraud, Max Keiser.
Well, they're basing their analysis or their value structure is tied to fiat money. And fiat money, by definition, has no intrinsic value at all. The dollars in your pocket are worthless, except for the paper that they're not printed on, as Gerald Celente likes to say. The Bitcoin, however, by comparison, is as you'd have to make the comparison to gold or silver. It has real, genuine, intrinsic value, and there has value on top of that as a means of exchange and as a store of value. But he's absolutely correct. Stock market and the bond market in particular, that's the key, is trading at 300-year highs in the UK and trading at 240-year highs in the United States.
We're out of time, Max. Will it completely go 1929, or what will the ongoing implosion look like? Slow molasses or lightning?
Buy Bitcoin. That's my answer.
I know, but I understand you've said that. But, I mean, how bad do you think it's going to get?
It's either going to be a complete and utter write-down of this bad debt and a deflationary depression, or they're going to go be like China and print $1 trillion a month, and then it's hyperinflation.
And I think the answer is hyperinflation. I don't think they're going to take their foot off the accelerator. Max Keiser, thanks for the time. We'll talk to you soon. But Stefan Molyneux can speak on basically any subject. That's why I like watching his shows online or listening to them, because it's thought-provoking, and I know a lot of history, so I can tell when somebody's got a wide-ranging knowledge. Not that anybody knows that much. There's so much info in the world. The more you learn, the more you know how much you don't know. And then it's frightening to see the content public and establishment believing they know so much and see knowledge as a threat to their delusions. But Stefan Molyneux is the founder of Freedom Domain Radio, the largest and most popular philosophical show in the world, with more than 2,400 podcasts, Free Domain Radio, with 2,400 podcasts, 10 books, and 50 million downloads. Stefan has spread the cause of liberty and philosophy to listeners throughout the world. Prior to launching Free Domain Radio, Stefan built a thriving career as a software entrepreneur and executive. In 2006, he left his work in the tech industry to devote his efforts to his radio show. Now a self-identified full-time parent and philosopher, Stefan speaks regularly at liberty-themed events all over North and South America. Stefan is the author of 2 novels, Revolutions and The God of Atheist, as well as 8 nonfiction books on relationships, government, and religion. And he's with us for the rest of the hour. I got a bunch of news I want to cover with him randomly, stuff that's broken today, to get his take on different topics, different angles of things. And as someone, I guess, who identifies as an atheist, I'm not mad at him or upset at him because he's a libertarian-minded person and believes in human liberty, and I agree with so much of what he has to say. So many times I see atheists and they're statists. In fact, I would say on average, most, at least the atheists I know and run into, they're big-time statists. And they think the state is God. They've really created just another God. And my whole argument is, even if you don't believe in spiritual realms, or the eye can only see a tiny fraction of what's actually going on out there, we know there's a lot of mysteries in the universe. Even if you don't believe in God, I like the Bill of Rights and Constitution because it has a higher power, and people are on top, then the state's under us. Well, the state always wants to get up there where God is above us. I don't want to get into an atheist debate here with Stefan. I just wanted to throw out that, You know, people say, well, you had a Jew on your show, or you had an atheist, or you had a Catholic, you had a Protestant. I'm not getting into all this infighting about what group somebody's in or what group they identify. I identify with wanting to have a planet that survives, a good future, and my children having a good future, and I'm a fan of humanity. And in Devil's Advocate, they have the devil character played by Al Pacino say, I'm a fan of man. Well, the archetypal devil in a Jungian way, it wants to kill, steal, and destroy, and is not a fan of man, God's creation, made in God's image as a little creator. So the devil doesn't want you to succeed, isn't a fan of man. It is a predatory system, not a virtuous economic model, as Max Keiser was talking about, but a vicious economic model where you enslave people to control them. And so Stefan joins us. There's so much to get into. I want to get into a new Vigil ad for one of these stimulant drugs they're pushing because it's so hilarious, the video that goes along with it, and get his take at the bottom of the hour on that and take calls. I want to get into Obamacare, the open collapse of the establishment with al-Qaeda publicly working for the U.S. government and NATO now. What does that do to their narrative? I want to get into where he thinks the world's going with China, because we know when governments get in trouble, they start big wars. Well, you can't do that anymore. They have nuclear weapons. So there's so much to talk about. But, Stefan, out of the gates, what do you want to talk about first, or you want to respond to anything I just said?
Well, I agree with you about, I call them stateists, or rather I want people to be stateists, which is to not believe in the state. There's this horrible thing that happens in history, as I'm sure you're aware. It's sort of like you have a balloon and you push one side of the balloon in and the other side bulges out. If you look at the atheistic political philosophies like communism, they may carve out a deity from the hierarchy of human thought, and then like a giant vacuum, state power rushes in to replace that. So I think that it's actually more dangerous, much more dangerous, to replace religion with the state, which seems to be the default position of most people who have secular concerns. They tend to be socialists. There's that traditional alignment of the left with agnosticism or atheism. You know, you may believe in religion, I may not believe in religion, but neither of us get to use the state to impose our will on the other. But when you get people who believe in the state, it becomes this massive sword of Damocles that you use to flatten the aspirations and potential of everyone else around you. So I completely agree. You know, live and let live as far as personal belief goes. But when people cross the border into wanting to wield political power, which comes more from the left than from the right, then we have great grounds for significant disagreement.
Well, as a guy that studies trends in history, where are we right now? I mean, my gut tells me, but Ron Paul was on yesterday, he concurred, we're at the crossroads right now. Do you concur with that? And what do we do during this flux point where more change happens in a decade than happens in the next 100 years? What do we do?
I agree with Ron Paul. I agree with you. It is now or never. I think this point in human history is the fulcrum. It is now or never. You ever played this game when you were a kid? You have a sort of slide, a teeter-totter, and you sort of walk up one end and then it tips, you go down the other. I think we're at that tipping point. As far as what we do, well, most people have no ethical standards whatsoever. That doesn't mean that they're evil or they're out there strangling hobos or anything. It just means that they go with whatever is most comfortable. Right, so if the media says, hey, Nelson Mandela is a hero, then everyone flies out and takes their self-pictures smiling away at the funeral, and they call him a hero. They'll just say whatever people tell them to. You need the government for protection. Our foreign policy is noble. We're going to bring democracy to Iraq. Whatever people hear that is convincing, that's what they will believe. They just do what is most comfortable. I think the goal, and this is all the way back to Socrates, the goal of thinkers is to make it more uncomfortable to be a conformist than to be an independent thinker. Right now, it's pretty comfortable to be a conformist, to believe that the government is going to help you and the war on terror is justified and, you know, we were defending freedoms all around the world. If that's comfortable, nobody's going to really get upset with you about that. I think that we really need to work to make it less comfortable to be a conformist, to hit people with information and perspectives that are going to throw them out of the matrix, push their face into the static of propaganda that they've been bathed in since virtually the day they were born. We have to keep pushing people off balance and making them uncomfortable so that then when they're going with the flow, it's actually it's uncomfortable for them rather than comfortable. And that is really based upon the willingness to just be annoying to people and to consistently remind them that truth, reason, virtue, and evidence is how we make decisions, not the political momentum of a dead history.
Very well said. Just some breaking news right now. Just about 5 minutes ago before we went live, or about 6, 7 minutes ago during the break, there's a Wichita, Kansas bomb scare with the police and TSA and everyone up there saying they caught someone who was in a bomb plot. Turns out over 100 times the last few years, and the New York Times even reports, the FBI has found mentally ill people who aren't even connected to real terror cells. The real terror cells work for the CIA and others and are actually attacking sovereign countries and trying to overthrow them right now. But I was even joking during the break and talking to the guys, probably something they're grandstanding or staged or, you know, wound up one of their patsies. And sure enough, they're now saying the FBI wound up, it'll be the same MO, some ADIQ, mentally ill person, I'm predicting. Wichita, Kansas, the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force arrested the man as he used his airport access card. So I guess he worked there. He says the man was attempting to deliver what he believed to be a vehicle loaded with explosive, which he would detonate and take his own life in the process. And you can bet money they approached him to lead the plot. And so many times, folks, I've said this, if they ask you to be part of a drill, if you work at an airport, they will set you up, too, to make it, again, I don't mean to digress, Stefan, but I mean, what do you think about honeybees kill more people, you can look it up, than terrorists every year, most of the terrorism staged, and then all the obvious pageantry and grandstanding that I need to have armored vehicles and checkpoints and be surveilled illegally, or bin Laden's going to shove a hand grenade, you know, up my rear end. I mean, what do we do about this?
Well, like all things, Alex, we try to make decisions based upon facts, and we steadfastly resist the lemming horde plunge off the cliff of terrified propaganda. What are the basic facts about terrorism? The basic facts about terrorism are twofold. The first is that you are 7 times more likely to be killed by a cop than you are by a terrorist. Even if we include the obvious gruesome outlier of 9/11, you are 7 times more likely to be killed by a cop than you are by a terrorist. So if we look at the numbers, we would say that arming cops to fight terrorists is going to put the civilian population in far more danger. That's the first thing to understand. Of course, the second thing to understand is that terrorists are created by terrorism. Terrorism is a virus that breeds like any disease or virus in a petri dish.
And by the way, they admit that. The 12-year war on terror has tripled the terrorism, the Pentagon even admits.
Yep. Yeah, and they kill 35 innocent civilians to kill one person that they identify as a terrorist. And how do they find out if he's a terrorist? Well, some guy they're torturing or some guy they're going to throw in prison for 20 years under the threat of torture and imprisonment. He says, oh, that guy, he's a terrorist. And so they go and blow him up. We don't know if he's a terrorist or not. The rule of law has completely disintegrated. Now they're just calling in drone strikes. And they just, what is it, in Yemen recently, they just drone struck a wedding.
15 people.
It's monstrous. And we're going to just get more and more of this blowback until we learn the lesson that if you go poking a hornet's nest, you're going to damn well get stung.
And then when they all attack, they then organize them and give part of Iraq to al-Qaeda and turn them loose on Syria. I'm not a fan of Syria, but, I mean, Syria's not attacking anybody.
Well, where's the self-defense? I mean, in international law, the only legitimate use of a military is in a case of imminent self-defense. And which of the U.S. wars have ever been based upon imminent self-defense? Y'all, if I can use the phrase y'all, have peaceful neighbors to the north and south. You have giant oceans to the east and west. When was the last time America was threatened with invasion? 1812, Canada. It's been about 200 years. I think it might be okay to lay down a few of the weapons and relax in a hammock for a while.
Well, instead they're building a giant army of Mordor to take over the planet and trying to take my guns, so they have the monopoly of force. Stefan Molyneux, our guest, always amazing having him on. Your phone calls are coming up as well, but we're going to cover a host of issues on the other side straight ahead. Going back to Stefan Molyneux, philosopher, researcher, radio talk show host, all-around interesting guy. This is only a 6-minute segment. Some of your calls coming up at the start of the next segment. But looking at all this other news, as the public gets more unlogical, as the public gets more dumbed down, or as one segment of it does, we see a shifting by President Obama and the establishment towards propaganda in entertainment. And they admit this, and not even having news anymore, just getting rid of dinosaur press, attacking alternative media, which is the only media that's left, CNN, MSNBC, over time to leave news entirely. and then just implant their messages in sitcoms, dramas, and have Hollywood stars promote Obamacare, saying it'll lower your prices when it actually increases them. So it's really a war on reality by the establishment. And more I realize they're engaged in a conscious war against common sense. A, do you agree with that? And B, how do we counter it where there's a large minority of us who aren't perfect, but we know fraud when we see it, and we know that free market and liberty works a lot better than collectivist tyranny. How do we reach out to the zombie-fied folks? Because I know smart people that when they see a celebrity on TV start drooling and getting excited and would slit their throat if the celebrity, you know, came down from heaven and talked to them, if the celebrity told them to. How do you get them out of this programming?
Well, of course, the first fraud we need to talk about is the fact that the current pimp for Obamacare is Adam Levine, the singer, who was named sexiest man alive, as if they've never seen you in a thong, Alex. I mean, how? That's the first fraud, that you have not made the cover of People in something incredibly skimpy. So that's once we can crack through the matrix in that standpoint. But what I say to people about Obamacare, it gives two very sort of brief points. The first, of course, is that it's completely illegal. The reason, of course, is that the executive in the United States, the president, has no power to pass laws. He has no power to pass laws. Only Congress has that power. Now, they have written 30 times more regulations into Obamacare since it was originally passed, with no input from Congress whatsoever. So 30 times, even if we accept that Congress got the first law right when nobody read it and they lied about it anyway, 30 times the amount of law has been written since it with no feedback from, no input from Congress. That makes the laws automatically invalid. And they keep changing the rules all the time with no input from Congress. This is a government by fiat. This is fascistic in its essence. The second thing is that over 1,300 organizations have been granted exemptions from Obamacare, including all of the unions and the public sector unions who were behind it to begin with. They're all now begging to be let out of this little hamster cage from hell. And so the reality is that in the Constitution very clearly spells out, you must have equal treatment under the law. The moment you pass a law, amend it afterwards with no input from Congress, and then you exempt 1,300 of your closest friends and closest friends' organizations from the application of the law. Invalid. Game over. No need for further debate or discussion. But of course, the media doesn't tell anyone this basic stuff.
Exactly. And you know, for me, I know why Oprah Winfrey and MSNBC push racism all day, because in my life and in growing up, what I see, it really is getting a lot better. I mean, everybody's just coming together, basically. That's what I see in Austin, Texas, and all over the country. I see it all over the world. But they got to keep it going, because the real discrimination is that all these special interest groups, coupled with government, are exempt and basically have diplomatic immunity from everything they're foisting on us. It's a unified system. That's the real discrimination. And the real global civil rights movement is about not letting government and corporations be exempt from laws they pass or lobby for.
Yeah, I mean, white Western culture is really pretty good at fighting authority. You know, all the way from the ancient Greeks, who were the first to come up with democracy and philosophy, all the way through the Romans, who tried their very best to limit the power of the state. Of course, it broke through the bonds of what they called the Constitution at the time, just as the American government does. All the way through all the struggles that went on to limit aristocratic power, the ending of the aristocracy throughout most of Europe, the fencing of it in England during the Glorious Revolution. We've been pretty good, and I say we very loosely here, but sort of white Western culture has been pretty good at trying to fight centralized and coercive authority. White Western culture was not just at the forefront, but was the sole cultural force that worked and spent blood and treasure worldwide to end the worldwide practice of slavery. Now, we've stumbled and we've created all kinds of messes, but we are, as a culture, really quite good at trying to fight centralized coercive power. And then, of course, even though our ancestors, for want of a better phrase, worked really hard to end the worldwide practice of slavery, generally only white racism is ever talked about, which historically is not exactly accurate.
That's where I want to go next.
Racism, you can look at lots of other groups first.
Yeah, I want you to come back and give me the floor on Mandela and that, because I've studied history, and I know slavery was worldwide, but then in the history books we're taught slavery is a white invention and that whites inherently are the devil. And why is that? Well, because it's the Western culture, architecture. They want to get rid of it. Stay with us. That makes a great Christmas gift, and it supports the broadcast. We're launching the whole news division over there the last 2 years, and we really are upping our game. The new studio is about to be up and ready. Got cable systems and stuff we're going to be on early next year. We need folks to use prisonplanet.tv, InfoWarsNews.com for what it was designed for. 11 people can use your membership username passcode. Just make sure it's not the same username passcode to your bank account. You know, create an original username passcode, and then you could probably give 20 friends and family an e-card saying, here's your gift. It's a subscription, live news, tape news, broadcast, 18 years of data on there, been up 11 years, the site itself, the nightly news, the daytime show, which is free to everybody on Infowars.com, but it's in a higher quality there. The nightly news is subscription for folks. All the films, all my documentaries, so many other documentaries, prisonplanet.tv. And if you are a member already, you can get 5 months off the yearly rate when you sign up in the month of December. That special, of course, is going to end in the new year. 5+ months. It comes out to like 5.3 months free when you pay for 6.7 months if you want to get technical. You can do that special for $39.95 a year instead of $54.95 because there's already a couple-month discount when you sign up for a year. Well, it's even more that we add on then, so it comes out to 5.3 months free versus if you just get it month to month at $5.95, or get a monthly membership for $5.95, and then 11 friends and family can simultaneously log in at, say, 7 o'clock at night and watch InfoWars Nightly News. So again, ladies and gentlemen, you are supporting and voting with your dollars the very tip of the spear of true non-state-run media. And the White House-run Media Matters, who brags their White House run, who write the talking points for CNN and MSNBC, they are declaring war now on the alternative media. They realize the dinosaur media, you know, Fox News, God love them, is, you know, mainly targeting people that are geriatric and are phasing out of this plane of consciousness. And so what they're really targeting is the internet. What they're targeting is InfoWars and Drudge and WorldNet Daily, and anybody else who isn't a total communist. So very, 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 very important. That story's up on Infowars.com. Now, Stefan, I want to get into the media wars. I think the genie's out of the bottle. No matter what they try, they're not going to succeed. But we have CISPA and SOPA and all these other partnerships and attempts to censor the press using fake copyright. I want your take on the media wars that are coming, where you think that's going. But first, Mandela. I've studied a lot about South Africa, and it seems to me they traded one evil out for another. And I saw your video you did on it last week and thought it was spot on. And you were starting to allude to it. How, if you really study history, everyone basically had a caste system, or what you call slavery, from India to China to Japan. If a samurai had a new sword, wanted to test it out, they'd go chop a villager up. That was their divine right. Wanted to have sex with you, you had to roll over and let them. And they were kind of a more cultured group of tyranny, you could say. I'm not knocking Japanese culture. Every culture had slaves. Romans had white slaves, had black slaves, you name it. Some Greek societies had what you call slaves. Others didn't, and would fight with them over it. There were riots 500 years ago in the transatlantic slave trade because they phased out some white slavery in Europe, so they went on sort of grabbing blacks, which they picked up from the Arabs. Not demonizing Arabs, it's just a fact. The Arabs are still running slavery in North Africa, but that's trendy and cool. We're told it's a different type of slavery. All I hear all day is I'm bad, Western culture's bad, and Western culture is dying, and the Western elite are helping kill it. Why are they doing that? You've got the floor.
Well, there's a small topic to deal with. Well, I mean, very briefly, of course, as you know, whites did not go to Africa and go into the country and capture, you know, the peaceful slaves or peaceful blacks and drag them off in slavery. Whites couldn't survive in Africa because we didn't have the immune system to deal with all the plagues. The average life expectancy for a white who left the coast and went inland was about 11 months. So the black slave trade and the Arab slave trade, the Middle Eastern slave trade was humming along, and whites went in and bought the slaves from the coastal cities and took them away. All nasty stuff. I mean, slavery is a fundamental moral abomination. Nobody has any argument with that.
I read the British reports from 300 years ago where on average a third of the ship would die of the white sailors just going to pick up slaves. And that was why the first multicultural pirate ships were created. It wasn't that they wanted to even revolt. It was a death sentence if you came back on a second mission. Go ahead.
Well, and the whites who were sailing the ships were themselves slaves. They were press ganged into this. I mean, it was the government power which is evil all over the world, pretty much, which needs to be fought. But so what happened, of course, was with a sort of an awakening consciousness, which came out of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, egalitarianism, the spirit of man, the universality of ethics, and so on, which was, of course, in the Declaration of Independence and was supposed to be a more foundational part of the U.S. Constitution. They started to say, well, maybe maybe owning other human beings like livestock is not really that great an idea. And the Royal Navy sailed around the seas, not in terms of conquest, there certainly was that element to it, but they were out there trying to catch slavers and trying to end the practice of slavery. The British government bribed many Arabic governments to have them stop, paid slave owners to have them stop having their slaves. And they had to catch these slave ships really quickly, because if you were a slave ship, a Royal Navy ship comes up behind you. If they think they're going to catch, if you think you're going to get caught, you cut the throats of your slaves and you dump them in the water. They had to catch them under cover of night. They had to steal on the ships to do this. This is how committed they were to ending this moral abomination called slavery. And this is nowhere taught. It is nowhere understood, because I think fundamentally white guilt is a very profitable resource for people to tweak. You know, you make a white person feel guilty, they'll be like, oh, here's some benefits, here's affirmative action, here's taxes, here's whatever you want, just stop making me feel guilty.
And then that hamstrings the people that are getting the handouts. And then that hamstrings the people that are becoming dependent.
Right. Yeah, and of course in Africa now, South Africa in particular, I mean, it's monstrous. Apartheid, of course, was immoral and racist and so on, but we do have to look to some degree at the relative ethics of the time. All of the other blacks in Africa were dying to get into South Africa. I visited there a few times and have a little bit of experience there. People were trying to get into South Africa. 60% of blacks and whites now say that they were better off under apartheid. And if you're saying that you're better off under apartheid, that is not exactly a ringing endorsement of your current system. South Africa is the rape and murder capital of the world at the moment. It is a disintegrating country, and I think it's partly because they didn't really go back and learn the lessons of the American Revolution, and you had a bunch of communists, of which Nelson Mandela was first and foremost. He wrote a treatise in his youth called How to Be a Good Communist, did not explicitly reject these views, and so the virus of socialism landed in Africa in the same way that it landed after the Raj ended in 1949 in India. You get all these socialists who go out there and try and set up this central planning communist socialist dystopia, and then things go to heck in a handbasket, and nobody sits there and says, well, it's because people aren't free to trade and own property and government's interfering with everything. It's the same lesson that we learned brutally for hundreds of years, and we've forgotten to teach other people.
Well, George Orwell valiantly joined the communists because he'd been a member of the British Imperial Police. Eric Blair was his real name, until he went and fought in the Abraham Lincoln Brigades and got shot in the throat in the Spanish Civil War against Hitler's forces. And then he wrote about in his books, I read them, how the communist leaders were actually just like bank robber, criminal, rapists who were using all the well-meaning communists to set up and just take over, and that they couldn't beat the Nazis because the communists were just so criminal they couldn't even organize. The Nazis were actually ideologues who believed what they were doing. And it's just incredible.
There is this belief that we have, you know, ordinary criminals like pickpockets and so on, and then we have organized criminals like the mafia and so on, and then above those people, like this archway above society, is this glowing godhood of statism that protects us from all these nasty little people. I think that the historically accurate, if not currently accurate view, is that the incompetent criminals are out there picking your pockets. The more competent criminals are organizing into mobs, but the most competent criminals run for office and end up in charge of the state. They are the best of the best. They're not there to protect you from criminals because they're kind of pursuing the same methodology, but better.
And that's what Zbigniew Brzezinski has said in 3 of his books. He admits that they run every criminal operation to control it for our own good, though, Stefan. We've got to be thankful they launder the drug money and run the little kids and, you know, do everything. We've got to be thankful they made drugs illegal to make larger profits. See how they helped us?
Well, of course, you hear this argument all the time. Without the government and the police, who on earth would protect your property, Alex? First of all, if you're allowed to own your own weaponry, your property is pretty safe to begin with. And secondly, how can I claim that somebody is there to protect my property when they take over 50% of it at source, and not even counting unfunded liabilities, debts, and deficits? When they take about 50% of my money,
that's right,
how can they be said to be protecting my money?
That's right. The average cop can be a really good person. On average, I've actually found them to be, you know, a lot of them are servants. But it doesn't matter. The big state is there to support, as you've said, and protect the farm animals from rogue wolves and coyotes that might try to come snack on a pig or a goat or a sheep or a chicken, or, you know, stop a weasel. The larger weasel is guarding the hen house from other weasels that aren't in his employ. The system is there to protect their racket over us, and now they're getting greedy and have created an Agenda 21 cosmology nomenclature where they fantasize that social engineering is looting us to reduce us down to the level of beggars to save the earth, while they themselves are the ones with government mismanagement allowing the degradation of the environment. It's incredible. I mean, the fruits of these people is literally liquid death.
Well, you know, one of the great tragedies of history, Alex, is that a truly free market doesn't have much use for sophists and sociopaths and all of the predatory wordsmiths of the upper classes. And so when there's a free market, you know what you have to do. You do this with your show. I do this with my show. We go out and we try to produce value to people on a voluntary basis. If they don't like us, they can just switch us off. If they find us offensive, they can turn us off. But we still have to go out there and provide truth on a voluntary basis. But if you're a politician, everyone's going to listen to you because you're in charge of all the weaponry in the known universe and beyond. So when you have a truly free market, all of the verbally adept, sociopathic busybodies who want to tell everyone else what to do can't really do it because they can try and boss you around. You're like, click, turn them off, don't care. And so these kinds of people can't really adapt to the free market. They want to retain the power, the political power to push everyone around. And, you know, the endless interfering busybodies of the human race would have precious little to do without the state. And that's one of the reasons why they like the state. It gives them this massive platform to move us all around like the little pawns, like the little ants, like the livestock that they think we are. The tragedy is they can only do it with our fundamental consent.
That's right. And it literally becomes an ether in which unnatural people that no one would want to associate with can now attain power and success instead of the natural, virtuous way. Whoever is the most hardworking, the most loving, the most creative, the most beautiful, the most honorable becomes the example of society. Then others emulate that, and you go to Alpha Centauris and to the next level of human development. But if you go with who has the most weapons, the most thugs, the most intimidation, the best BS, you build systems of BS to where the public then mimics that, civilization collapses, and then it restarts over with virtue again. Then we become decadent and corrupt. The problem is we can't go through that cycle again because they're going to destroy the planet with the weaponry this time. They must be stopped.
Well, I agree with that. And there is this awful thing that is fundamental where people say, well, Barack Obama or Sarkozy or Putin or whoever it is, they should be in charge. They should be telling everyone what to do. They know the way things should be. And I would love to see a world, Alex, where these guys had the power of, say, an advice column. You know, where you could write into these guys and say, Barack Obama, how should I deal with my health care? And he'd say, well, I, as a constitutional law professor, I believe that you should do X, Y, blah, blah, whatever, right? I'd love to just see them have the power of an advice column. Or, you know, they'd have a hotline. You'd call them up and say, Barack, I don't really know what to do with 50% of my income. What do you think I should do? He said, well, you should spend it on this, 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 and this. That's what I want. They don't have the power to compel our obedience, but they actually have to win us over with reason and evidence. Wouldn't that be a beautiful world?
Exactly. Instead, they blow stuff up or let people blow stuff up and then fearmonger until we give up all of our rights. Let me ask you this, and we're going to go to phone calls. Where do you, Stefan Molyneux, where do you think this battle in your gut, just as Gestalt, is going? Is liberty losing or winning? And will the globalists
Alex,
blow stuff up?
You were gonna get flecks of foam on your webcam because this is a topic I actually feel quite quite passionate about. So I will give you my very, very brief answer to that. There is no momentum in history. There is no great movements of history that push us around. We are not pinballs in the endless bumper. Sorry, for your younger audience, you'll have to ask your parents what that means. We're not pinballs bumping around the bumpers of some giant cosmic pinball machine. Where the world goes is where committed, passionate, knowledgeable communicators make it go. It's where you make it go. It's where I make it go. It's where your listeners make it go in their conversations, in their lives. Where does history go? Where is the momentum of human history? In the willpower of committed individuals and in no other place. Now, it's true that if committed people of intelligence and integrity and willpower do nothing, then yes, the worst tends to overcome the better. Like if you sit on your couch, you get fatter, not leaner. And if we do nothing, then yes, evil wins. But all we have to do is get off our butts and make the world uncomfortable for the conformists, which provokes them into thinking like you sharpen a sword against a spinning sand wheel. Then we just go and make the world uncomfortable. We push the world where we want it to go. We make the world go where we want it to go because we have the better arguments.
Exactly.
We have the greater evidence. And the accumulated evidence of history is completely on our side.
I agree, and the statists all say this. Cass Sunstein says, we'll infiltrate the alternative media, discredit it by acting, bad, putting out racism, disinfo. And they say we've got to just keep pushing, pushing, pushing. They even admit in their own papers, they all want freedom. The average person wants to be a libertarian or beyond, but we've got to act like they're all alone. We've got to just dominate them, whip them, break their will. And so the crazy thing is they write all these books like we're not reading them. I think their arrogance is going to undo them. So we have to make them uncomfortable everywhere, just like they do us. And that's what I do. And it's not a tiring thing, folks. Once you start doing this, it's like finally breathing. Oh, I was supposed to do this. This is the animating contest of liberty that Jefferson talked about.
Yes, and don't you remember when you were a kid and you did something bad or did something wrong, which basically meant you disagreed with the authority and ease of the powers that be in your school or wherever? What would they say to you? They'd say, Alex Jones, young Alex Jones, this is going to go on your permanent record. And those words were like, oh my goodness, it's going to be tattooed on my forehead and so on. And now, of course, we all have a genuine permanent record called everything we ever do on the internet or in a bank machine or using our credit card through the NSA. And what has it done? It has done fundamentally nothing to us other than give us more ammunition to push back against this encroaching tyranny.
Exactly. Call their bluff, double down on life. Get crazed. I mean, humans are meant to be wild and full of life and instead of just waddling around wearing sports jerseys, watching steroid heads push each other around and grab each other's butts. I mean, it's just, there's so much more in the universe than watching Obama or watching John Boehner or watching all these people. That's what I hate, is how the statists make us look at them, make us talk about them, even to block them. We need to make them where they're the joke they are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, look, I mean, what are we as a species? How did we evolve? We evolved as hunter-gatherers. Now, we've all just kind of thrown the hunter side aside, and we've just become these gatherers. Like, oh, look, there's some nuts called welfare or the military-industrial complex.
Exactly, stay there. Finish that thought. Finish that thought. We're going to be right back. When the music's playing, they can't hear me. We're going to be right back, folks. Stay with us. Stefan, finish your point about that. About the hunter.
Yeah, just we've lost our, I think, to some degree, masculinity. Bring back the masculinity, bring back the spine. We've just become these gatherers looking for the rotten fruits of power that drip down on our tables and going, like what a great meal. Let's go out and hunt ourselves some freedom. It's all language, it's all reason, it's all evidence. There's no weaponry that's going to set us free, because the real prison, the real state, the real tyranny is in the mind. But we can blow through that stuff with reason and evidence.
And once you
really
shift into the hunter mode
and bring down a big predator called freedom. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I agree. Once we shift into hunter mode against the enemy, that's combat mode as well. They're shifted into that with deceit. We shift into the hunter mode with liberty. We're going to kick their butt.
And we all love combat. Are you talking about sports? Sports is combat. I mean, how well do combat movies show? We all love combat. It's invigorating. The great mistake, of course, has been to try to get a fight with weapons rather than with language, rather than with philosophy, rather than with reason and evidence. But when you get into that mode, it's really invigorating. People look at that and say, oh, there's so much fighting. It's so tense. It must be so stressful. It's kind of what we're built for, people. This is why we're not in the caves. This is why we're not jellyfish or amoeba anymore. I mean, most of us. So I think that it's I invite people to take on the combat. It's what Andrew Breitbart used to say, walk towards the fire. Walk towards the fire, because if you run away, it's going to catch you only with your back turned.
Absolutely. God bless you. That's very well said. God bless to the atheists. It's a endearing term. Let's talk to Greg in Pennsylvania. Thanks for holding, brother. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello there, gentlemen. I'd like to throw something out there that nobody has talked about. It would be the Farm Bill and, the role in what the farmers would play in things as they progress. And, I'm a small farmer. I have to work a 50-hour-a-week job just to keep the farm going and keep everything going. And it's just, I'd just like to get your take on the Farm Bill or I guess we could call it the food stamp bill. And what would be a good,
well, I'll be honest with you. I've read some about it, but it's always changing. You're the expert. Give us your brief take on it, then we'll get Stefan's take.
Well, from what I read of it, it's basically a food stamp bill. 80% of it is food stamps, and none of it that I know helps me, a small farmer.
Yeah, well, that's what they do. They always get control of the economy and then call it one thing and do another. I know this. American farmers were much more prosperous, and there were more of them before government got involved. They're replacing it with Big Agra. Only Big Agra knows how to get the incentives and the free deals. Let's get Stefan's take on that. God bless you, Greg. Good question.
Well, on the right, the Republican Party gets an average donation of about $50 each. In other words, small farmers can help the Republican Party. On the left, the Democratic Party has refused to release the size of their average donation, because I'm not even going out on a limb to guess that it's far larger than that, because it comes from a lot of rich elites in the media and in the entertainment industry and so on. So one of the problems is the people on the left, they want bigger and bigger organizations, because the small people, they like to fund parties that are focusing on smaller government and free trade, like the Republican Party. So when you get big aggregate groups together, that tends to benefit the left. And so when you start to give farm subsidies, then you start to make it more profitable to lobby politicians and all that kind of good stuff.
Stay there. Back in 60. Back in 60. Final segment. Straight ahead with Stefan Molyneux. And we'll give you his website. I'm back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Sunday transmission. Stay with us. Nightly news tonight. Something really funny tonight. Jones. Look, they have breaks at the end and the start of the hours. And I've got to end it here because I want to go to the LA Times lady who's here to interview me. And then I got a bunch of meetings. So each caller, just ask a quick question or comment. We'll get Stefan's one-line response. I'll try to shut up. Joe in North Carolina, thanks for calling. You're watching us on Roku right now. Go ahead.
Hey, Alex, first-time caller. I'll make this real quick. I got some disturbing information yesterday that I haven't heard you talk about yet concerning the missing nuclear warheads from Dyess Air Force Base. The news came to me from a former Congress or a Senate woman, I can't remember which, who was a reverend, and purportedly the nukes were detonated under Obama's order as they went into continuity of government mode in the White House bunker. The Pentagon had got word of this, and the members of our military, instead of detonating the nukes in Charleston Harbor, where they were told to detonate them by the government, they detonated them out at sea.
Well, sir, do this. Email me with some facts and some info and the names, and I'll look into it. There's a lot of stuff going on. We know the nukes did come up missing directly from the base source, who we confirmed and talked to. I don't know about all the speculation that's come after it, but Stefan Molyneux, let me ask you this question. What is to stop, and your website's freedomainradio.com, what is to stop governments from staging false flags, staging terror attacks? How do we take that ace in the hole away from them?
The alertness and skepticism of people outside the mainstream media. The nuke thing is interesting. Do you know what the nuclear launch codes were throughout most of the Cold War?
8 zeros.
7 zeros in a row.
Or how many zeros?
7 zeros. In other words, you could have ended the human race by leaning on a keyboard accidentally. This is the kind of security you're going to get from the state.
I know. What is wrong with these people?
I mean, a birthday, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, anything, just not all the zeros in a row. That's not even a code.
Very well said. Man, I tell you, I forgot about that story last week. Danny in Indiana, go ahead. Thank you for calling.
Hey, what's going on, Alex?
Worldwide broadcast, brother.
Right on, man. Yeah, I just wanted to share something that really, ticked me off. I was watching the show Parks and Rec the other day. I don't know if you know that show. But it's local government in a fictitious town in Indiana where I live. And it's always portrays the town hall meetings as all the locals are just morons, and they bring up really stupid stuff, and it's all about hey, why don't you, we need to protect these people from themselves, basically. And I'm watching it one day, and it's about fluoride. They don't want fluoride in their water, and they're just portrayed as bumbling morons, and I just had to turn my TV off. It just made me so angry. It was just so blatant, media propaganda inserted into entertainment. I don't know. Just had to share that.
But it's good news. Look, I'm sorry. It's great news that this is even coming up as a topic. All of the attacks on libertarianism that have come out recently are incredibly good news. You know what Gandhi said, right? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
That's right.
We're actually in the phase of fighting. I think it's fantastic. Let's bring more of this stuff up, and let's people make more fun of us, because then at least they're talking about the issues which we'll always win on.
Exactly. I mean, I've been doing this 18 years, folks. 20 as an activist for liberty. When they're attacking you, man, you're winning. I mean, well, Stefan Molyneux. We gotta
bring it on, baby. Bring it on.
What an evil person. I'm joking. All right, Michael, all these others. I don't know if I can get to you. I apologize. Call me back on the Sunday show. I promise. Front of the line for Michael, Simon, Jesse. Here's a story, finally, we'll put on screen. Just broke. You know, the Russians threatened to nuke us if we keep moving weapons close to them 2 days ago. Well, now, defense analysts, U.S. should plan for war with China. Analysts told House members that U.S. is currently unprepared for potential conflict. Yeah, they couldn't beat the Taliban, so now let's start a war with Russia and China. Closing comments on this bat-you-know-what crazy info.
Well, it means, of course, that we are nearing the end of the fiat money death spiral because they're starting to talk about war. As you pointed out earlier, the rulers used to love wars until there were nuclear weapons when they could be targeted themselves, and suddenly it's blessed are the peacemakers. They will talk about this stuff to rile you up, to keep you distracted, and what they're trying to do is get you so scared that you will accept a lower standard of living. Do not accept a reduction in the quality of your life. Do not accept the lower standard of living based upon the predations of the state. Fight back in prosperity and freedom.
That's right. Great job. That's right. Thank you, Stefan. All right, folks.